He woke up under two moons in a world that doesn't exist. His body aches as if he'd just been through a washing machine. And the first thing he hears is the creak of a taut bowstring. Someone is already aiming at his forehead. Ethan Reed throws his eyes open and stares up at the sky. Two moons, white and familiar, red and huge like a wound. Wet, warm moss beneath his back. It smells of pine needles and something sweet that doesn't exist in Portland at 3 in the morning. He blinks. The moons don't disappear. His body screams in pain. He tries to sit up and freezes. That very sound, the creak of wood under tension. That's what a bowstring sounds like when it's pulled back to the ear. He slowly turns his head. A woman stands 4 paces away, a red tangle of hair, a scar across her eyebrow, hands covered in old cuts. A hunter. The arrow is aimed right between his eyebrows. It's impossible to miss. Ethan freezes. 8 years in the ambulance service had drilled one rule into him. When a weapon is pointed at you, don't look at the face, look at the hands. Her right hand on the bowstring is trembling, slightly and rapidly. It's not fatigue, it's fear. He's seen this 1,000 times. Drunken husbands with knives, teenagers with bats in the eyes of cornered dogs, old women with canes. The protocol is always the same. Palms in plain sight. Voice lower, slower. Don't threaten, don't beg. Just stop being a threat. He raises his open palms, fingers spread. I'm empty. He looks into her eyes, green, pupils dilated with adrenaline. She's been holding the bow for a minute, maybe longer. Her shoulder is burning. He speaks softly, in that voice that kicks in on its own when a patient is in shock. Low, steady, with pauses. He says his name is Ethan, that he won't touch her, that her arms are tired and he can see it. She doesn't understand the words. Her eyes show it's a different language, but she catches the voice, the rhythm, the way he breathes evenly and slowly, the way his palms remain open. She twitches her chin, lowers the bow 3 inches, another 3, and suddenly sits right down on the moss. The bow falls nearby. She covers her face with her hands and cries, quietly, like someone who has long since forgotten how to cry loudly. Ethan sits on the wet moss beneath 2 moons in an impossible world. He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know how he got here. He doesn't know if he's even alive. But before him is a person who is hurting, and that's what he knows how to do. It's the only thing he truly knows how to do, really. He doesn't reach out to her. He just breathes steadily. A minute later, she's breathing in time with him. 2 minutes later, she takes her hands away from her face. 3 minutes later, she looks at him with wet eyes and lets out a single word, hoarsely. He doesn't understand the meaning, but he understands the tone. It's a name. Ren. She pokes her finger at her chest. Ren! Then she points at him. He points at himself. Ethan, she repeats it. Ethan comes out, close enough. She stands up, picks up her bow, waves her hand deep into the forest. Let's go. He gets up. His legs are unsteady. His head is spinning, but he walks. Ren glides silently ahead. Her feet find the path among the roots as confidently as if the forest were her home. Ethan stumbles every 10 steps. She doesn't turn around, but each time she slows down just enough for him to catch up. She's used to guiding people through this forest. The living, and perhaps not only them. The forest around them is strange. Trunks 3 arms widths thick, bark with a silvery sheen. A faint blue light flows between the roots. It pulses like a living glow. Ethan freezes and looks down. The light comes from the earth itself. Thin lines like veins stretch between the roots deep into the ground. He crouches down and reaches out. Ren turns sharply and grabs his wrist. She shakes her head firmly. Don't touch it. He pulls his hand back. Got it. Not everything here feels to the touch. They walk for about an hour. Ethan counts out of habit. In an ambulance, time is a tool. How many minutes until the hospital? How many heartbeats until he passes out from blood loss? Here he counts simply to keep from losing his mind. The birds aren't singing like birds, but as if someone were running a wet finger along the rim of a glass. Blue lights in the air, not fireflies. They move too deliberately, as if they're watching. Ren stops. He whistles twice times. Torches emerge from the darkness, 5 of them. Behind them are women, all in leather, all armed. Bows, short swords, knives at their belts. They see Ethan and freeze. One drops her torch, another grabs her sword. A third steps back and raises her hand to her face. An incomprehensible gesture, either defensive or religious. Ren speaks quickly and harshly, in the tone of a soldier reporting to a commander. A large woman steps forward, gray hair, a face carved from oak, around 50. She examines him the way a pathologist examines a specimen, without emotion. Then she reaches out and touches his chin, turns his head to the left. To the right. She examines his neck, his hands, his shoulders. He stands still, not moving a muscle. In the ambulance, the old man had touched his face too, checking to see if he was real. The woman steps back and utters a single word, quietly. All five exchange glances. Ren answers. The gray-haired woman shakes her head for a long time, like a man who's been told the impossible. Then he looks at Ethan. And for the first time, he sees in the stranger's eyes neither fear nor shock. Something ancient, something like hope that died so long ago it's unrecognizable. The camp is small. 7 tents made of animal skins, a campfire in the center, ropes with dried meat strung between the trees. Ethan counts 12 women, from the very young to the gray-haired elder. They're all staring at him, constantly, as if he were a wild beast they'd brought into the house. They give him a skin and a bowl of hot food. Meat, roots, broth. He eats slowly, his stomach is rebelling. Ren sits down next to him an arm's length away. Not right next to him like a guard. Her bow lies on her lap. Ethan sets down the bowl, points at the bow, then at the ground, then at himself, open palms. I'm not... Ren stares for a long time. Then she puts the onion on the ground, not far, but on the ground. This is Ethan Reed's first day in a world that shouldn't exist. He doesn't know how he got here, doesn't know why, doesn't know if he'll live to see tomorrow. But he knows one thing. The woman who found him in the woods cried with relief when she saw he was alive. Not out of fear, out of relief. As if she had been waiting, as if she knew someone was coming. In a world where he doesn't understand a single word, that is the only thing that matters. Someone was waiting. Someone found him. And that someone laid a bow on the ground. For a paramedic with 8 years of night shifts under his belt, that's enough to stay. The morning began with a scream. Ethan woke up instantly. His body reacted before his brain did. 8 years on the ambulance. A paramedic's sleep isn't sleep. It's being on call with his eyes closed. He sat up on the animal skins and listened. The scream was high-pitched, a child's. Not from pain, from fear. From the tent at the edge of the camp. He stood up and headed toward the sound. Ren intercepted him halfway there, grabbed him by the shoulder, shook her head. Don't go. One of the nurses came out of the tent, young, about 20, pale-faced. Her hands were shaking. She spoke quickly to Ren. Ethan didn't understand the words, but he understood everything else. The pace of her speech, the pitch of her voice, the direction of her gaze. The young hunter wasn't just alarmed. She was in a panic. And the panic wasn't for herself, for someone in the tent. The older one. The one he had already begun to call the mother hunter in his mind. She approached with quick steps. She listened. She nodded. She ducked into the tent. A minute later, she came back out. Her face was even stiffer than usual. She looked at Ethan, then at Ren. She said something briefly. Ren looked at him with an expression he read without a doubt. I don't know if it's worth it. But the elder repeated it. Ren sighed and waved him over. Go. He entered the tent. It was dark inside. It smelled of sweat and something burnt. A girl is lying on a bed of animal skins. 14, maybe 15 years old, curled up in a ball, shivering, slightly and incessantly. An older woman knelt beside her, a mentor, judging by her demeanor, stern, upright, one hand on the girl's shoulder, the other holding an open book. She was reading aloud, monotonously, rhythmically, like a prayer or an incantation. Ethan crouched down. He looked at the girl, trembling limbs, rapid breathing, shallow. Her chest was rising and falling too quickly. Her skin was pale with a bluish tinge on her lips. Her pupils were dilated. The pulse in her neck was visible to the naked eye, rapid, over 120. Something was glowing on her palms, faintly, pulsating. Reddish sparks ran along her fingers and faded. The girl stared at her own hands in horror, as if they didn't belong to her. The mentor read louder, faster. The girl shook harder. The light on her palms flickered. Red, white, red. Brighter, fainter, chaotically. It wasn't the first time Ethan had seen this scene. Not the light, of course. The light was new. But he had seen everything else dozens of times. A teenager in the emergency room. The first panic attack. The body doing something unfamiliar and terrifying. The heart pounding. The hands going numb. It feels like you're dying. An adult nearby tries to help and makes it worse because they impose their authority instead of grounding her. He touched the counselor on the shoulder, gently. She turned around, abruptly. Her eyes were angry. "Who are you?" He held out his open palm. "Wait," then he pointed to the book. Then he shook his head. Then he put a finger to his lips. "Shh." The mentor frowned. She looked toward the tent entrance where the hunter mother stood. The elder nodded. The mentor slowly closed the book, with an expression that said, "If she dies, it's on you." Ethan knelt down in front of the girl, not too close, at a distance where she could see him but not feel his presence. He looked into her eyes. They were dark, wet with tears, wild with fear. He began to breathe, slowly, loudly, so she could hear him. Inhale for 4 seconds, a 2-second pause, exhale for 6. He didn't speak, didn't try. The language barrier made words useless. But breathing is universal. Rhythm is universal. He breathed and looked into her eyes, steady, calm, without demand, without expectation. Simply, "I'm here. I'm breathing. You can too." A minute passed. The girl's was still shaking, but her gaze was fixed on him, on the rhythm of his chest, on the movement of his ribs. He reached out his hand, palm up, not toward her. He simply placed it on the skin between them, an invitation, not an order. 30 seconds later, the girl slowly unclenched her fist and placed her palm on his. Her hand was hot, almost burning. Sparks flickered on her fingers and died out. She felt his pulse, steady, 68 beats. The working pulse of a paramedic who maintains his composure out of professional necessity. He began counting aloud, quietly, in English. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4. Inhale. 1, 2. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2 minutes later, she was breathing in time with him. The tremors subsided, her skin turned pink. The pulse in her neck slowed, her lips stopped turning blue. And then a small flame ignited on her right palm, which was resting on his hand. Small, steady, pure, warm. Not chaotic flashes like before. A single steady flame, like a candle. The girl looked at her hand, then at Ethan, then back at her hand. And she smiled, her first smile, through drying tears. The mentor behind him was silent. He turned around. She was looking at him. Her expression changed before his eyes. First anger, then confusion, then something else. Something for which there is a place on people's faces, but which is rarely used. Awe. She looked at the elder. The elder stood in the tent's doorway, her oak-like face unmoving, but her eyes were shining. Ethan stood up. His knees creaked. He nodded to the mentor, nodded to the girl, stepped out of the tent. 7 hunters stood outside. Everyone saw. The tent flap was pulled aside and they were watching. He walked past them to the fire, sat down, took the bowl he'd eaten from yesterday. It was empty and cold. A minute later, Ren sat down beside him. Silently, she took the bowl. She left. She returned with a full one, hot, and with a piece of bread that hadn't been there yesterday. He ate. The camp buzzed around him with quiet voices. He didn't understand the words, but understood the intonations. 8 years of listening to people who had painfully taught him to hear the music of speech without a vocabulary. They were discussing him, arguing. Some voices were wary, others were excited. Still others were frightened. But not a single one was hostile. Yet. The day passed strangely. They didn't touch him, didn't approach him. But they didn't chase him away either. He sat by the fire and watched. A professional habit. In the ambulance, he'd learned to read a situation in 30 seconds. Here, he did the same. The camp was military, not just a hunting camp. The women moved according to a schedule. Guard shifts, archery practice, sharpening weapons, cooking in shifts. The hierarchy was strict. The senior officer was at the top. Below her were 2 or 3 squad leaders, then the rank and file. Discipline was good. Equipment was meager. Clothes were patched many times over. Food was scarce. Little meat, mostly roots and thin broth. This wasn't a regular army. These were partisans, or outcasts, or both. Toward evening, one of the hunters approached him, a young woman. She was 22. Her left arm hung unnaturally. Her shoulder was slumped. She moved her arm cautiously and winced with every movement. A dislocation, not fresh, a few days, maybe a week. She pointed to her shoulder, then at him, then at the girl who was now sitting by another fire, quietly watching the flame in her palm with a smile. Ethan understood. You helped her? Help me. He stood up, pointed at her shoulder. Can I take a look? She nodded. He examined it, palpated it. A acromioclavicular joint. Anterior dislocation. Not the first time. The capsule is stretched. The muscles are spasmed. A week without reduction? Bad. But it's not critical. He showed her what he was going to do, with his hands, slowly. He took her good arm, positioned it, then pointed to the injured one, indicated the direction. She understood, nodded, clenched her teeth. He popped her shoulder back into place in a single motion, quickly, precisely. A crack, she yelped, briefly, then froze. She moved her arm, slowly. Her eyes widened. She raised her arm, bent it, straightened it. The pain was gone. Not all of it, but the sharp pain was gone. She looked at him and laughed, loudly, like a child who'd been shown a magic trick. The camp erupted in laughter. The hunter shouted something to her companions. Ethan didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. He'd done it, just with his hands. Without magic, just with his hands. By nightfall, 4 people were sitting by his fire. Ren, the girl with the spark, the huntress with her shoulder set, and another who had come to show him a cut on her thigh. The cut was inflamed, red, hot, the beginning of an infection. Ethan washed it with boiled water. He asked with gestures. Boiling water, a clean cloth. Ren brought them. He washed the wound, examined it. Not very deep, no stitches needed, just a clean bandage and washing twice a day. He demonstrated. Morning and evening. Boiled water, clean cloth. She nodded. The hunter mother watched from her tent, all day. She didn't approach. She didn't speak. She just watched. Ethan felt her gaze like physical pressure. She was making a decision. He could see it. He'd seen that same process 1,000 times. The head nurse in the emergency room deciding whether to let a new paramedic handle the critical cases or have them stick with the minor ones for a while longer. Mother Hunter was deciding. To keep him or send him away. To take him in or give him away. He couldn't influence that decision. He could only do what he knew how to do. Help those around him. And wait. That night, Ren sat down next to him by the smoldering fire. Everyone was asleep. The guards stood along the perimeter. She pulled something out from under her cloak. A small object, wooden, carved from bone or horn. A figurine, human, male. He didn't realize it right away. The figurine was rough. Shoulders wider than hips, no chest, a square jaw. Ancient, worn. Like an object that had been passed from hand to hand for many generations. Ren showed him the figurine. Then she pointed at him. Then she pressed the figurine to her chest, and she said a word, quietly. He didn't know its meaning, but from the way she said it, from the way her voice faltered on the last syllable, from the way she held the figurine, he understood that this word meant something like father, or source, or beginning, or all of it together. Ethan Reed sat by the fire at the camp of the female hunters and looked at the ancient figurine of a man that the red-haired girl with a scar across her eyebrow was showing him. And for the first time since waking up, he thought, not about what kind of world this was, not how to get home, but what had happened to the men. For the first week, Ethan learned the language. Not from books, they didn't give him any books, from people. He would point at an object and wait. Ren or whoever nearby would say the word. He repeated it. Fire, water, bread, knife, bow, arrow, tree, moon, 2 moons, white moon, red moon. He memorized quickly, not because he was a genius, because in the ambulance he had worked with patients who didn't speak English, Spanish, Vietnamese, Russian, Arabic. He didn't learn whole languages. He learned key words, pain, where, how much, Breathe. Don't move. Everything will be okay. This skill came in handy. In 5 days, he could say basic phrases. In 7, he understood simple sentences. The grammar was different. The word order was unfamiliar. But he clung to patterns. In the ambulance, you learn to find patterns in the heartbeat, in the breathing, in the way the patient holds their hand on their stomach. Language was yet another pattern. Complex, but not impossible. Mother Hunter made her decision on the 4th day. She didn't announce it. She simply stopped viewing him as a problem and began to see him as a fact. He is here, he is useful, he stays. This was expressed in small ways. He was given a separate corner in the tent instead of a spot by the fire. They gave him a warm pelt, a knife. Not a combat knife, a utility knife, but a knife. Trust measured in metal. On the 8th day, an inspection came. Ethan sensed it before he saw it. The camp had changed. The women moved faster, quieter. Weapons were closer at hand. The guards had doubled. Mother Hunter put on the breastplate that usually hung in her tent. Something was coming. Someone was coming. 2 riders appeared on the trail around noon. Women on horses, not hunters, others. Better clothes, better weapons. Long swords and sheaths covered in blue leather. A mark on their shoulders. A silver circle with a vertical line. Ethan didn't know what it meant, but Mother Hunter stood a little straighter at the sight of that symbol. Not out of respect, out of wariness. The visitors dismounted. The older of the 2 was tall, dark hair, a cold face. Her armor was light but well made. She surveyed the camp, quickly, professionally, like someone assessing not the place, but the people. Her gaze found Ethan in 3 seconds. He was sitting by the fire, sewing up a torn hide. Ren had given him the needle. The thread was coarse. The work was slow. But he knew how to sew. Medics know how to sew. Leather, fabric, it's all the same. Stitch by stitch. The visitor froze. Her face didn't change, but her body did. Her shoulders pulled back slightly. Her hand moved a little closer to her sword. Her breath caught for half a second. Ethan saw it. He always saw. She didn't believe it. She had come to check out a crazy rumor about a man in the Grey Sisters camp. And now she saw that the rumor was true, and she didn't know what to do about it. Mother Hunter approached her. They spoke quietly, for a long time. Ethan didn't try to eavesdrop, he kept sewing. 20 minutes later, Mother Hunter approached him. She spoke slowly, so that he would understand. Stand up, come here. He stood up. He walked over. The guests looked up at him. He was a head taller than her. She walked around him, slowly, as if around a statue in a museum. She stopped in front of him. She asked a question. Not to him, to Mother Hunter. She answered briefly. The guest reached out and placed her hand on his chest, on his heart. Ethan didn't move. Her hand was cold, even through the fabric. And then he felt it, something, like a faint electric shock. Not painful, more like static when you take off a sweater in winter. It traveled from her hand to his chest and back. The visitor jerked her hand back quickly, as if she'd been burned. She looked at her palm, then at him. Her cold face cracked for a second. Just for a second, fear showed beneath the mask. Then the mask returned. She turned to the Mother Hunter. She said one sentence, short, harsh. The Mother Hunter replied even more briefly. The guest nodded, mounted her horse, rode away. The second one followed her. The camp exhaled. Ethan saw the hunter's shoulders slump at once. The tension was gone. Not all of it, but the sharp edge was gone. He walked over to Ren, pointed at the departing riders. Who? Ren answered. 2 words. He knew the first one. Queen. The second was new. Guard, or eyes, or both. The Queen's people. They were checking. The rumor had reached the capital. That evening, the Mother Hunter spoke to him for the first time. Not through gestures, with words. Slowly, as if to a child. She sat down across from him by the fire, a face of oak, eyes of flint, and she began to speak. He understood 1 word out of 3, but it was enough. She spoke of the world, of history, of how everything works. No men. Not for a long time. A very long time. Him. She didn't know how he had appeared. She didn't know why. But she knew that now they would come for him. All of them. She said a word that he would remember forever. It meant all at once. Value, pray, and sacrifice. Ethan listened, nodded. memorized. When she finished, he spoke in broken language, uttering his first real sentences in this world. I am not prey. I am not a sacrifice. I am the one who heals. Mother Hunter looked at him for a long time. Then she said, then heal, because nothing else here will save you. For the next few days, he healed. See, systematically. He asked Ren to bring him everything the camp had in the way of medicine. She brought a small bag. Inside were dried herbs, 6 kinds. He didn't know a single one, but he knew the principles. He sniffed each one, tasted them on his tongue. One was bitter with an astringent aftertaste, probably an antiseptic or astringent. One with a menthol scent, possibly an analgesic. The rest were uncertain, not much, but better than nothing. He made a list, with gestures and drawings, what he needed, boiled water, always. That's non-negotiable. Clean cloth for bandages, alcohol or its equivalent, Ren found some. A local moonshine, strong stuff, smells like jet fuel, perfect for disinfecting. He set up a spot, a corner of the tent, a clean hide on the floor, tools, a knife, a needle, thread. Not ideal, far from ideal, but medics work with what they have. He examined the entire camp. 12 women, each had something. Chronic or acute, back pain from sleeping on the ground, dental problems, a malunited wrist fracture in one of the older women, skin inflammations from dirty clothes, intestinal parasites, at least 3 of them. The symptoms were typical. He couldn't solve everything, but he could start with hygiene. The simplest rules, which he hammered home with gestures and drawings on the ground. Boil water before drinking. Wash hands before eating. Wash bandages. Do not drink from the stream downstream from where they wash. They looked at him in surprise, some with irritation. Some man was teaching them how to live. But the results came quickly. 3 days after switching to boiled water, 2 of the hunters were free of chronic stomach pains. 5 days later, the inflamed cut on her thigh, which he had treated on the first evening, had healed cleanly. No pus, no complications. The hunter showed the healing wound to her companions and spoke quickly, pointing at Ethan. He didn't understand the words, but he saw how their attitude was changing. Not all at once, millimeter by millimeter, like a door being opened very slowly. On the 10th day, Mother Hunter Eowyn called her. He had learned her full name from Ren. Eowyn approached him in the morning. With her was the youngest of the hunters, 16 years old, slender, pale, dark circles under her eyes. She was coughing, dryly, frequently. It had been at least a week since her throat had been irritated. Eowyn pointed at the girl, then at him. Treat her. He examined her lungs. He put his ear to her back. He asked her to breathe deeply. No wheezing, not pneumonia, more likely bronchitis, or an allergic reaction, or a combination. He needed more information. He asked Ren, how long had she been coughing? How was she sleeping? What was she eating? Ren translated. The answers were poor. She's been coughing for ages. She sleeps poorly. She eats little. Ethan looked at the girl's thin arms, at her collarbones protruding beneath her skin. Malnutrition, a weakened immune system. Against this backdrop, a chronic cough could develop into anything. He did what he could. Hot drinks made from that mint-scented herb, lots of them, 3 times a day. Steam inhalations, a pot of boiling water, then cover up with a blanket. Breathe. Food, more food, specifically for her, meat if available, broth, protein. He told Eowyn straight out, in his broken language of 3 dozen words, she's hungry. Sick from hunger. Needs food. More. Eowyn looked at him so he understood. There's no more food. They're all hungry. It's just that some can cope and others can't. That night, Ethan lay on the animal skins and stared into the darkness of the tent. 12 women. In the forest. Hiding. Starving. Armed to the teeth yet barely scraping by. He didn't know their story. Didn't know why they were here. Didn't know who they were hiding from. But he knew they were dying. Slowly. Quietly. From malnutrition. From chronic illnesses. From wounds treated with prayers instead of antiseptic. And he knew that if he didn't do something, they would keep dying, with him or without him. He closed his eyes and thought of Portland, about night shifts, about the radio at 3 in the morning. about the smell of coffee from the vending machine at the station, about Maya, who laughed even when the call was bad, about how he'd turn the wheel, about how his last thought wasn't about himself. And then he realized one simple thing. He wasn't here by accident, not because of fate or prophecy, but because he'd been following that sound his whole life. A scream, a moan, the quiet, desperate breathing of someone in distress. He'd been following that sound in Portland, and he would follow that sound here, not because he was a hero, because he didn't know any other way. She arrived 3 weeks after the scouts, without warning, without an escort visible from the outside. Ethan later learned that 2 guards were waiting half a mile from the camp, camouflaged so well that even the Gray sisters hadn't found them. It was a typical morning. Ethan was cleaning a wound on one of the hunter's legs, an old wound. It opened up regularly. Proper stitches were needed, but there were no proper tools. He worked with what he had. A needle heated over a fire, threads made from tendons, not sterile, but better than nothing. The huntress sat motionless, gritting her teeth, making no sound. He was used to it by now. These women endured pain as a fact of life. For them, complaining about a wound was as strange as complaining about the rain. Wren whistled, twice, quickly, an alarm signal. Ethan looked up. Wren stood at the edge of the camp watching the trail. Her hand rested on her bow, not gripping it, just resting there. Ready, but not aggressive. Someone was coming. Someone she saw and recognized, but someone she needed to be on guard against. A woman emerged from the forest, alone, in a simple traveling cloak. Her hood was down, her silver hair was braided into a plait that fell over her shoulder to her waist. Tall, slender, pale, so much so that at first Ethan thought, anemia. Then he looked more closely. Not anemia. It was her natural color, like alabaster, or like the moon, a white moon over this forest. She walked through the camp and the camp parted, not out of fear, out of something else. The hunters froze. Some lowered their heads, some stepped back. One knelt down. The woman in the cloak didn't look at them. She walked straight ahead, toward him. Her eyes found him immediately, gray, light, cold as a steel tool. She walked toward him, removing her gloves as she went, finger by finger, slowly, like a ritual. The hunter mother Eowyn stepped forward to meet him. She stood between them. She bowed, briefly, not obsequiously, with respect but also with distance. She spoke a single word, a title. Ethan didn't know it, but from the camp's reaction, from the way the air grew thick, he understood. This wasn't just an important person. This was the most important person he could possibly have stumbled upon. The woman stopped 3 steps away from him. He stood there. His hands were covered in the blood of the huntress he had just stitched up. The needle was still in his right hand. Not the most formal of greetings. She looked at his hands, at the blood, at the needle, at the face of the hunter behind him, who was sitting with her wound stitched up and, for the first time in her life, didn't know where to put herself. Then she looked at him, for a long time, looking down on him even though he was taller. She knew how to look down on anyone. She spoke. Her voice was low, steady, every word like a stone placed in its spot. Ethan understood about half of it. That was enough. You, man, they're looking for you. You're coming with me. Not a request, an order, familiar, automatic. The voice of a person who had never heard the word no. Ethan put down the needle, wiped his hands on a rag, looked at her, and instead of answering her words, he said what he saw, slowly, in his broken language, word by word, with pauses. You haven't slept. 3 nights, maybe 4. Eyes. Right here. He pointed to his temples. Pain, head. For a long time, shoulders. He pointed to his trapezius. Right here, stiff, stone. The pain goes up. To the head. You think it's a disease from the crown. No, a disease from the body. The body is tired. You are tired. Silence. Complete. The whole camp froze. 12 hunters looked at him and at the woman with silver hair. No one was breathing. She looked at him. Her expression didn't change. A second. 2. 5. 10. He saw something happening behind those gray eyes, like a mechanism that had worked flawlessly for 20 years made its first microscopic click. Not because of his words, because someone had actually spoken those words. Someone looked at her and saw not a title, not a crown, not a threat, but a tired woman who hadn't slept in a long time. She replied, with a single word, cold as ice on a scalpel. Ethan didn't know that word, but he understood it from the context. Shut up. Or worse, she turned to Eowyn. She spoke quickly, harshly. The words cut through the air. Eowyn answered quietly, briefly. Ethan caught snippets. Take it. No. The crown. Here. Dangerous. My camp. The argument went on for about 10 minutes. Eowyn stood like a rock. She didn't shout. She didn't threaten. She just stood there and said no. The woman with silver hair wasn't used to the word no. You could tell by the way her eyes narrowed, by the way her fingers turned white as they clenched her gloves. Finally, she turned around, abruptly. Her cloak whipped against the moss. She headed toward the path. The camp exhaled, but halfway there, she stopped. She turned back. She looked at Ethan, and he saw something no one else in that camp had seen. For a single second, for a single blink, the mask cracked. And beneath it was not arrogance. Beneath it was a weariness so deep that he could physically feel it. The weariness of a woman carrying the weight of the entire world on her shoulders, and no one had ever asked if it was hard for her. She was gone. Ethan turned to Ren. Who was that? Ren answered slowly. Serafina, Valeros, the queen. He nodded, sat back down next to the wounded hunter, continued his work. His hands didn't tremble. The ambulance had brought patients of greater importance, governors, district attorneys, once a senator's wife. The protocol was the same. They were all the same, all flesh and bone. They all got sick the same way, and they all felt equally bad at 3 a.m. A week later, she returned, alone. No cloak, no gloves, no crown. In plain clothes. Ethan sat by the fire and taught a little girl with a flame in her palm how to apply a bandage. The girl tried her best. Her fingers were still clumsy. The knots were crooked. But she understood the principle. Serafina stood at the edge of the camp and watched. A minute, 2. He knew she was there, but he didn't turn around. Not because he was playing, because the patient was in front of him. The girl, her hands, her knots. That was more important right now. 5 minutes later, Serafina came over herself. She sat down next to him, silently, like someone who had come not to give orders, but simply to sit. He finished with the girl, sent her off to practice. He turned to Serafina. She sat upright, her back as straight as a ruler. Even when she came without a crown, her body wore a crown. He looked at her. She was silent. He asked, one word, head. She didn't answer. Then she nodded, briefly, almost imperceptibly. He stood up. He approached from behind. He placed his hands on her shoulders. She flinched, sharply, with her whole body, a reflex. No one touches the queen. No one stands behind the queen. He didn't remove his hands, but he didn't press either. He just held them there, lightly, like a feather. 10 seconds later, she stopped flinching. 20 seconds later, her shoulders dropped a millimeter. He began to work. The trapezius, the right bundle, a deep spasm, chronic, months, maybe years. He worked the muscles slowly, firmly, precisely. She was silent, breathing through her teeth, not from pain, from the fact that no one had touched her in so long that her body had forgotten what it felt like. Just someone's hands on her shoulders. Just someone nearby who wanted nothing more than for her to feel better. 20 minutes later, he removed his hands, sat down beside her. She sat motionless, eyes closed. For the first time in all the time he'd known her face wasn't a mask, just a face. Tired, young, 29 years old. She was younger than some of the nurses he'd worked with in Portland, and she carried 1,000 times more on her shoulders. She opened her eyes, looked at him, and asked, quietly, in a voice he'd never heard from her before, without steel, without ice, just a voice. How did you know? He understood the question, answered. Eyes, shoulders, breathing. I see the body doesn't lie. She was silent. Then she said, no one asked, ever. Like me, everyone asks, like the kingdom. He nodded, said, I don't know the kingdom. I know. You weren't sleeping. That's bad. Sleep. She stood up, left. This time she didn't turn around, didn't look back. She just walked through the forest back the way she came. But Ethan watched her walk. A little slower, a little softer. like someone whose temples aren't throbbing for the first time in a long while. That evening, Ren sat down next to him. She was silent for a long time, then she said, slowly, "You spoke with the queen, as with a hunter," he replied. "I spoke with a weary woman, as with a weary woman." Ren looked at him for a long time, then she said, "She'll come back," Ethan said. "I know." That night, Ethan woke up to a sound that shouldn't have been there. Quiet, soft, like a bell underwater. Not from outside, inside his head. He sat up. The tent was dark. Ren was sleeping by the entrance, her bow within reach. The sound didn't stop. It didn't get louder. It didn't get quieter. It just was. Like a pulse, steady and persistent. He stepped out of the tent. The sky was clear, 2 moons, a white one at its zenith, a one near the horizon. The camp was asleep. The guards were at their posts. One of them looked at him and nodded. They were used to it. He often went out at night. A medic's insomnia, not an illness, a habit. A body that had been falling asleep in fits and starts for 20 years doesn't know how to sleep through the night. The sound came from the forest, from the east. Ethan stood and listened, not with his ears, with else, as if the sound were passing past his eardrums, straight into the bones of his skull. A vibration, quiet, warm, alluring. He took a step toward the woods. A guard called out to him. He raised his hand. "Wait, just a minute." He took another step. Trees ahead, silvery bark, blue veins of light in the roots. And something else. Something that hadn't been there before. The light in the roots pulsed faster, in time with the sound in his head, in the rhythm of his heart. He crouched down, reached out toward the ground. Last time Ren had stopped him. Now she wasn't there. His palm touched the moss, and the light beneath the moss flashed. Not bright, not dangerous. Like a light bulb in a stairwell that had been turned on after a month of darkness. Warm, golden. It traveled from his palm through the veins in the roots, 5 meters, 10, 20, like ripples on water. Ethan withdrew his hand. The light slowly faded. The sound in his head subsided. He sat on the moss and breathed. Quickly, his hands were shaking, not from the cold. For the first time in 3 weeks in this world, he was truly afraid. Because this wasn't medicine, not a skill, not a protocol. It was something he couldn't explain, couldn't classify, couldn't fit into a box on the call form. The earth had reacted to his touch. The light had come to life, as if it had been waiting for him. In the morning, he didn't tell anyone, not because he was hiding it, because he didn't know how to say it in the language he knew at the level of a 3-year-old. How to say it. Last night I touched the ground and it lit up. In any language, that sounds like nonsense. The day passed as usual, checkups, dressings. The girl with the cough was feeling better. Hot drinks and steam inhalations were working. The cough had turned productive, a good sign. Her body was fighting. The girl with the spark. Ethan learned her name, Suri. She followed him around the camp like a shadow, quiet, watching. The flame in her palm burned steadily. She controlled it, lit it and extinguished it at will. Progress. The mentor came every day, watched, said nothing, left. But she no longer took out the book of litanies. On the 3rd day after the incident, a stranger arrived at the camp. Not on horseback, on foot. Small, slender, long black hair down to her waist. Strange clothing, white, light, like a nightgown. Barefoot. Barefoot through a forest full of roots and stones, and not a single scratch on her feet. Ethan noticed it first, like a pro. The guards spotted her too late. She stepped out from behind the trees as if she'd just materialized. No sound, no crackling of branches, as if the forest had parted. The hunters grabbed their weapons, 3 bows drawn, swords drawn from their sheaths. Eowyn stepped forward. The woman in white did not stop. She walked straight ahead, not toward Eowyn, past her, toward him. Her eyes, he saw them as she drew closer. Dark, very dark, almost black, but not black. The color of a stormy sky a second before lightning. Deep, and they weren't looking at him. Through him, as if she saw something behind him, or within him, or through time. Eowyn cried out, "Stop!" The woman stopped, not because of the command, because she had reached him. She stood before him at arm's length. She looked. She was silent. Then she reached out and touched his face. Her fingers were cold. Light as a feather, she ran her palm over his cheek, over his forehead, over his closed eyes, like a blind man reading a face. He stood and did not move, not because he couldn't, because there was something about her touch, unworldly, not threatening, but absolutely not of this world. And this was said by a man who himself was not of this world. She withdrew her hand, closed her eyes, and she cried, quietly, soundlessly. Tears ran down her cheeks and fell onto the white fabric. She cried and smiled at the same time, like a person who had been searching for something their whole life and had finally found it, and found not what they expected, but found it. Eowyn approached. Her voice was harsh. "Who are you?" The woman opened her eyes. She looked at Eowyn. She spoke. 2 words. Eowyn took a step back, physically. The hunters exchanged glances. Ren lowered her bow. She didn't put it down. She lowered it. 2 words. Ethan later learned what they meant. Hana-sun, the oracle. She was silent all day. She sat by the fire. She looked at the flames, not at him, at the fire. Ethan went about his business. Examinations, bandaging, language. He didn't approach her, not because he was afraid, because he saw. She was somewhere far away, not physically, mentally. Her eyes would go out of focus every few minutes. She would freeze mid-sentence if someone spoke to her. Then she'd come back, blink, as if waking up. Dissociation. He'd seen it in patients with severe trauma, in veterans, in accident victims. When the brain can't stay in one place all the time and drifts away. That evening he walked over, sat down next to her, didn't speak, just sat there. She turned toward him, eyes like a stormy sky, slightly clearer now, slightly closer. She's here, right now. Hana-san began to speak, slowly, quietly. Strange words. She was talking about him, about his hands, about how they were warm. He didn't understand all the words, but he understood the main thing. She had seen him, before, in dreams, a long time ago, many times, a man with warm hands. She had seen him for 7 years, 7 years of dreams. He tried to imagine it. 7 years of seeing a man who doesn't exist, every night. Fragments. Fragments. Hands. A voice. A face you can't make out, and not knowing if he's real, or if it's just another vision, or an illness, or madness. 7 years, since she was 15. While other girls were learning to shoot a bow and start a fire, she saw in her dreams a man who doesn't exist, in a world where men haven't existed for 2,500 years. He held out his hand, palm up, just like with the girl Suri back then, a suggestion, not an order. Hana-san looked at his palm, for a long time. Then she placed hers on it, slender fingers, cold, as if the blood didn't reach the tips. He cupped her hand with both of his, gently, like holding something fragile, and he just held it, warmed it. He said nothing. There was no need. A minute later, she spoke, quietly, so quietly that he felt it rather than heard it. They fell silent. He didn't catch the word. He asked, "Who?" She pointed to her head. Voices, visions, dreams. They fell silent. For the first time, she looked at him, and there was something in her eyes that took Ethan Reed's breath away, the paramedic from Portland who held the hands of dying old men and never cried. There was silence in her eyes. For the first time in 7 years, he understood. Not magically, professionally. A 22-year-old girl who had been living with a constant stream of visions for 7 years, who couldn't tell her dreams apart from other people's memories, who didn't know where the present ended and the future began. This wasn't a mystical gift. It was a clinical case. Chronic sensory overload, dissociative episodes, burnout, deep exhaustion. She doesn't need a priest. She needs rest, food, sleep, and someone by her side who will be an anchor in the present, he said, slowly, choosing his words. You're tired, very tired. Dreams are hard. You haven't slept without them in a long time. She nodded. When did you eat? She didn't answer. He stood up. He went to the pot, poured some broth, hot. He came back, set it in front of her. Eat, slowly. She looked at the bowl, as if at something unfamiliar, as if she'd forgotten that food existed. She picked it up, brought it to her lips. She swallowed. Again, again. He sat next to her and watched her eat, making sure she didn't eat too fast. A hungry person can hurt themselves by eating too fast. She finished eating, set the bowl down, looked at him, said, "You're not like that." "Like in my dreams?" he asked. "How was I in your dreams?" she thought. She said, "More, brighter, faceless." He smiled. "Sorry, I'm just me." She shook her head. "No, don't apologize. The present is better. The present is warm." She showed him the scroll. She pulled it from the folds of her white robe, old, worn, symbols on yellowed paper. A prophecy. She said the word, and he knew it. Oracles, visions, the future. She unrolled the scroll. She showed him the lines. He couldn't read them. Language, writing, different. But she read aloud, slowly, and he caught the words he knew. "He will come, the one, before, silence, blood, will remember. He who was before the silence will come, and the blood will remember." A prophecy about him, or about someone like him, or about something he doesn't understand yet. Hana-san looked at him expectantly. Decipher, explain. "You came, so you know." He didn't know. He had no idea what those words meant. He was a paramedic from Portland. He didn't decipher prophecies. He deciphered electrocardiograms. But he saw something else. He saw a girl who had lived for 7 years for the sake of this scroll, for the sake of these words, who had subordinated her entire life to other people's visions and other people's expectations, who didn't eat, didn't sleep, didn't live in the present. Because the future was louder. And he didn't say what she wanted to hear. He said what she needed to hear. "I don't know what this means. Not yet. But I know you're tired of carrying this alone. You've been carrying it for 7 years. Enough. Put it down. I'm here. The scroll isn't going anywhere. And you can go to sleep. Just sleep. Without dreams. I'll sit here with you." Hana-san looked at him for a long time. Stormy eyes, wet. Not from tears, from something bigger. From the fact that for the first time in 7 years, someone had told her, "Don't tell me what you saw. Just go to sleep." She rolled up the scroll, put it away, lay down on the hide next to the fire, closed her eyes. He sat beside her. He didn't touch her. He didn't speak. He was simply there. 10 minutes later, she was asleep. Evenly, quietly, without a start, without muttering. Her first peaceful sleep in 7 years. Ren approached quietly. She sat down on the other side of him. She looked at the sleeping Hana-san, then at him. She whispered, "You're strange." He whispered back, "I know." She paused, then she said, "She's important, very. The whole world is looking for her, just like they're looking for me." Ren nodded. "Just like you, only longer." Ethan looked at the sleeping girl with long black hair, 22 years old, 7 of them captive to her own visions. He couldn't cure the prophecy, he couldn't turn off the voices in her head, but he could make sure she ate hot soup and slept at night. For a start, that was enough. Ren took something out of her pocket, a strip of dried meat. She held it out to him. He took it, took a bite. Tough, salty, perfect. They sat side by side in silence, the medic and a hunter, on either side of the sleeping oracle, under 2 moons, in a world where he wasn't supposed to be. And it felt almost normal, almost like a night shift, only without a radio and with a better view out the window. Chapter summary. The oracle Hana-san had come to the camp on her own. She had seen Ethan in her dreams for 7 years. Next to him, her visions fell silent for the first time. Ethan diagnosed her with chronic exhaustion and dissociative episodes caused by an overload of visions. Instead of deciphering the prophecy, he fed her and put her to bed. She stayed at the camp. Earlier that night, Ethan discovered that his touch brought light to the Earth's ley lines, but he didn't tell anyone about it. A month at the Grey Sisters camp changed everything. Ethan didn't notice the moment when he stopped counting days. In the ambulance, he had always counted. Hours until the end of the shift, minutes until the hospital, seconds until cardiac arrest. Here, the count was lost. The days began to resemble one another, and yet each brought something new. His tongue moved faster. Hana-san turned out to be a patient teacher when she was in the present, when her eyes didn't drift off to something invisible beyond the horizon. She sat next to him and named things, not just objects, concepts. Blood as power, blood as kinship, blood as religion. One word, three meanings. Ley lines. They call them the veins of the world. Living channels of power beneath the earth that nourish everything. Trees, grass, magic, life. The veins were weakening. Everyone knew this. They spoke of it in whispers, as if it were a disease that could not be named aloud. Ren taught him something else, practical things. Which berries were safe to eat? Which ones would kill you in an hour? What tracks predators left behind? How to read the forest by its sounds. Silence meant danger. When the birds fell silent, something was coming. She taught him in silence. She showed him. She waited for him to repeat it. She didn't praise him. She didn't scold him. She just nodded when he got it right. A paramedic's approach, he recognized it. That's how they taught interns in the ambulance. Don't explain, show. Then step back and watch. Serafina came by, once a week, sometimes more often. Always alone, always without her crown. She sat down next to him. She was silent. Sometimes he massaged her shoulders. Sometimes he just sat next to her. She started talking to him, not like a subject, not like a asset, like a person from whom she had nothing to gain. She told him about the capital, about the court, about the great houses fighting among themselves for the remnants of power, about the ley lines fading one by one, about children being born without magic, more and more, every generation, about the fear that no one voiced aloud, that one day magic would end completely, and then the world that had stood on it for 2,500 years would collapse. Ethan listened. He asked questions, simple ones. How much? When? Where? How fast? She answered. At first surprised, then with something resembling relief. He wasn't asking for political reasons, for medical ones. He was gathering a medical history, not of a person, but of the world. How many generations? How fast it's weakening. What the first symptoms are. He thought of it as a patient. The world is sick. It has been for a long time, chronically. The symptoms are getting worse. The prognosis without treatment is poor. Once she asked a question. Directly, harshly, like a queen. Who are you? He answered honestly, I don't know. She looked at him, waiting for him to continue. He said, I was a paramedic. I saved people on the roads, then I died, then I woke up here. That's all I know. She was silent for a long time. Then she said, that's not enough. He nodded. I know, but it's the truth. And the truth doesn't have to be enough. She left that evening sooner than usual and returned 2 days later with a book, Tolstoy, an old one, bound in dark leather. She placed it in front of him. She said, The History of Silence. All we know. Read it. He looked at the book, then at her. I'm still not very good at reading in your language. She sat down next to him, opened the book, began to read aloud slowly, the way you read to a child. Aurelia, queen of the Holy Empire, sat in a hunter's camp in the forest and read aloud a historical chronicle to a medic from another world. If anyone from the great houses had seen this, it would have sparked the second coup d'etat in a century. The book told of the silence of the fathers, 2,500 years ago, one night. All men are dead. No one knows why. The official version. The wrath of the great mothers, punishment for sins. Men carried impurity within them, and the world was cleansed. The lunar gift came as a blessing. Women were given the ability to give birth without men, from the ley, from the earth's power, a pure birth, a sacred one. So said the church of the great mothers. So they taught in the temples. So they believed for 2,500 years. Ethan listened. And the more he listened, the more he felt that very sensation. Familiar, like an ambulance call. When the call seems to be one thing, but on the scene it turns out to be something else entirely. A call for stomach pain, but you arrive and see that the person has been poisoned. A call for a headache, but there's a stroke. Something didn't add up. One night, all men, instantly. This isn't a disease. Diseases don't work like that. This isn't a natural phenomenon. Nature isn't selective about gender. This is something else. Something manufactured. Intentional. He didn't say it out loud, not yet, but he noted it in his head. Just as he used to jot down suspicions in the ambulance, marginal notes, to double-check later. Hanasan was changing these days, slowly, millimeter by millimeter. She ate 3 times a day. Ethan watched over her. He stood over her with a bowl like she was a fussy child. At first she was angry, then she resigned herself to it. Then she started coming to the fire on her own, on time. It was a victory, a small one, an inconspicuous one, but a victory. She slept every night near the fire, near him, not because he possessed some kind of magic, because near him the visions were silent. He was an anchor, a point in the present she could hold on to. The dissociative episodes became less frequent. They didn't stop, but they went from 3 or 4 times a day to just once. She became clearer, sharper. She started finishing her sentences. She started laughing, quietly, like someone who was learning that sound all over again. One morning she walked up to him, her eyes clear, completely clear, without a storm. She said, "I had a dream, a normal one, about eating soup and feeling warm. The first normal dream in 7 years." Ethan looked at her, smiled, said, "A great dream." She smiled back, and it wasn't the smile she used to wear, detached, mystical. It was the smile of a 22-year-old girl who, for the first time in 7 years, felt alive. He turned away so she wouldn't see his face, because something tightened in his chest. Not from pain, from the fact that he recognized that expression. He'd seen it in Portland, when a patient, after a long illness, gets out of bed for the first time and takes 3 steps down the hallway and smiles. Just like that. Exactly like that. The camp's problems hadn't gone away. There wasn't enough food. The hunters were going farther. They were coming back with less game. The forest was emptying. Winter was approaching. Ethan could tell by the trees, by the air, by the way the women had started mending the tents more carefully, patching the holes, stockpiling firewood. They were preparing for the cold, and they were preparing poorly. Supplies for 12 people, now 14 with him and Hansen. It won't be enough. He walked up to Eowyn, straight to the point. "How much food?" She looked at him, answered. A number. He calculated in his head. For 3 moons, if counting by the local lunar cycles, if they rationed, if the winter was mild, if the winter was harsh, for 2, maybe less. He asked, "Could they leave? Go somewhere else? Where there was food?" Eowyn shook her head. "It's safe here. It's dangerous out there. They're here because no one is looking for them here. If they move, they'll be found. Not just the Queen, others, those who are worse." Ethan had been thinking about this all day. There was a saying in the ambulance: "You can't treat a patient who won't eat. You can't heal the world by sitting in the woods and starving. We need a way out. We need a connection to the world outside the camp. We need resources, food, tools, medicine, knowledge. Everything that's in the capital and isn't here." That evening he approached Ren. He said, "I need to go to the city." Ren looked at him as if he'd suggested jumping off a cliff. "No," he said. "Listen. We're going to die here. Not from enemies, from starvation, in winter. I have to do something." Ren was silent, then she said, "They'll recognize you." He shook his head. "No one has seen me." Ren raised an eyebrow, the one with the scar. A telling gesture. She said, "You're a man. They'll recognize you, because you're the only man in the world." He opened his mouth, closed it. She was right, absolutely. He was the only man on the entire continent. Going incognito wasn't an option. But the idea wouldn't go away. It lodged in his mind like a splinter. And 2 days later, it bore fruit. He wouldn't go to the city. The city would come to him, through Serafina. She was the only one who could provide resources without risk. The question was how to ask the Queen for help without becoming her property. Serafina arrived 4 days later. He had been waiting, preparing. He weighed his words. In the ambulance before a difficult conversation with a patient's relatives, he always planned his sentences in advance. What to say, how to say it, in what order. It was the same here, only the patient was an entire camp. She arrived in the evening, more tired than usual. He could tell by her gait. A little heavier on her left leg, her right shoulder higher than her left, compensating. She was carrying something invisible on the right side of her body. Tension, or pain, or both. He let her sit down. He handed her a bowl of broth. She took it. She drank it, in silence. He massaged her shoulders, as usual. 20 minutes. Her breathing evened out. The tension melted away beneath his fingers like ice under warm water. Then he spoke, directly, as if to a patient who needed to be told that The treatment would be long and expensive. The camp is starving. Winter is 2 moons away. There won't be enough food. The women are sick. I need medicine, instruments, bandages, food, alcohol, metal for tools. I can't get this myself. You can. Serafina listened. Her face was impassive, a royal mask, but her eyes were alive, calculating. He could see the gears turning behind her gray irises. Politics, risks, cost, benefit. She was a monarch. Every action had consequences. If she started supplying the camp in the forest, it would be noticed. Supplies, caravans, people who would know. Everyone who knew was a threat, she asked. What will you give in return? He replied. Nothing. She raised an eyebrow, an exact copy of Ren's gesture. Maybe all women in this world did that, he continued. I don't trade. I'm not a politician. I'm not a resource. I heal people. If you give me tools, I'll heal more people. Not for you, for them. If that suits you, help. If not, I'll find another way. Silence. The campfire crackled. Somewhere in the forest, a nightbird hooted. Serafina looked at him for a long time, and he saw something shift within her. Not a politician calculating his gain. A woman who had carried a crumbling kingdom on her shoulders for 12 years and was hearing for the first time someone say, not, what will you give me, but what can I do? She said, you're either the stupidest person I've ever met or the most dangerous. He replied, they told me the same thing in the ambulance, usually both at the same time. She didn't smile, but something twitched at the corner of her lips. A micro-movement. He noticed. She left. Without saying yes or no. A week later, a box appeared on the trail to the camp. No markings, no letter, no guards. Ren found it at dawn, brought it to the camp. They opened it. Inside was fabric, clean, white, plenty of it. Vials of something clear. Ethan sniffed it. Alcohol. Pure. 10 times better than the hunter's moonshine. Metal tools, rough, but made of good steel. 2 knives, forceps, something like a clamp, and a sack of grain, a big one. At the bottom of the box lay a note. 1 word. He recognized Serafina's handwriting. The word meant heal. Ethan stood over the open box and felt something hot rising from his chest to his throat. Not tears. Paramedics don't cry over equipment. But something close to it. In Portland, he'd worked with an ambulance crew where half the equipment was on its last legs. They counted bandages, they rationed syringes. And here, the queen of an entire country had sent him a box of supplies without a single condition. 1 word. Heal. As if she had finally understood that he wasn't bargaining, that he really was just healing. He got to work. For real. Systematic. He set up a sort of medical station in a separate tent, a clean zone, fresh animal skins on the floor every day, instruments and alcohol, gauze cut into bandages. He drew up a schedule of checkups. Every hunter once every 5 days. A full examination. Pulse, breathing, eyes, teeth, skin, hands, feet. He took notes, with drawings on birch bark because he couldn't write in the local language yet. But he drew a diagram of the body. He noted problems. He monitored the progress. The girl with the cough. Suri told him her name was Miel. Little Miel. The cough went away, completely. After 3 weeks of hot drinks, inhalations, and proper food made from royal grain, she gained weight, not much, but her collarbones stopped sticking out like blades. Her cheeks turned rosy. She ran around the camp with Suri, 2 girls, one with a flame in her palm, the other without magic but with lungs that, for the first time in a long while, were working as they should. They laughed. That sound changed the camp more than all its bandages put together. Eowyn approached him one morning, early, when the camp was still asleep. She was limping. He had noticed it long ago, but she hadn't shown it. An old fracture, her right shin. It had healed improperly. The bone had fused at an angle. Every step cost her effort. 47 years old, 30 of them on her feet in the forest with a bow. Ethan crouched down. He examined her leg, felt it. She didn't flinch, didn't wince. A woman of steel, he said. I can't fix this. Break it and set it again. No, not here, not with these tools. But I can make it easier. A bandage, support, exercises, every day. She looked at him. An oak-like face, flint gray eyes. She said, I've been limping for 30 years. 30 years, no one noticed, he replied. I noticed on the 2nd day. She asked, why didn't you say anything? He replied, Because you didn't ask. Silence. Then she said quietly, "My boy." He didn't understand right away. The word was unfamiliar. Then he understood and didn't know what to say. So he just started bandaging her leg. In the evenings, he sat by the fire and thought about the book Serafina had read to him, about the silence of the fathers, about how things weren't working out. One night, all men, he remembered. There'd been a case in the ambulance. Mass poisoning at a factory. 30 people at once, all with the same symptoms. The investigation showed that the poison was in the water. One source, one cause, 30 victims. Here the scale is different. The whole world, all men. But the principle was the same. One cause, one source. If you find the source, you can understand what happened. Hana-san sat down next to him. She was doing this more and more often, not for the visions, just to be close. She said, "You're thinking about the silence." He nodded. She said, "I'm thinking about it too. I have been for a long time. My visions show fragments, fire, women in a circle, the earth shakes, light goes into the ground, and then silence." He turned to her. "Women in a circle, not men, women." She nodded. Ethan was silent for a long time. Then he said, "This doesn't look like God's punishment. It looks like a ritual." Hana-san looked at him, stormy eyes, clear, and in them he saw that she already knew, or suspected, for a long time, and feared this knowledge more than her own most terrifying visions. The attack came at dawn on the 6th week. Ethan woke to the guard's scream, short, abrupt. That's how people scream when their throat is seized mid-sound. He slid off the skins. His body reacted before his brain. The ambulance crew had been called to dangerous areas before, gunfire, knives, once a gas explosion. His body remembered. Down, to the ground. Don't get up until you assess the situation. Ren was already standing, bow in her hands, arrow on the string, eyes narrowed, scanning. She pushed him with her hand. "Down, don't move." He lay down. He heard screams, the clang of metal, the short whistle of an arrow, a thud, a cry, another one, a fight close by, on the camp's perimeter. It all lasted 4 minutes. He counted, automatically. Then Ren straightened up, lowered the bow, said one word, "Clear." He stood up, stepped out of the tent. 3 bodies lay at the edge of the camp. Women, dressed as simple travelers. Their faces were covered with cloth. One clutched a knife in her hand, thin, long. Not a hunting knife, not a battle knife, a murderer's knife. 2 arrows in her back. The second had her throat slit. Eowyn's handiwork. He'd seen the knife in her hand, blood on the blade. The third was alive. She lies face down. Her hands are bound behind her back. The huntress is pinning her to the ground with her knee. The sentry, the one who was screaming. She was sitting by the tree. Her hand is pressed against her side. Blood, a lot of it. Ethan approached, quickly. He knelt down, moved her arm, a cut. Deep, right side, between the ribs, intercostal muscle. Not a lung. The knife didn't go all the way in. She blocked the blow and spun around. The blade slid along her ribs instead of going between them. Lucky, very lucky. He worked quickly. His hands moved on their own, pressure on the wound, clean cloth, plenty of it. Press down, hold it. Arterial or venous bleeding. The blood is dark, venous. Good, it's not gushing, it's flowing steadily. Pressure, more cloth, alcohol. "It's going to hurt," he warned her. One word, "It hurts." She clenched her teeth. He rinsed it. She flinched, didn't scream. Women of steel, all done. Then the needle, scorched. Thread and alcohol, stitch, edge to edge, evenly, quickly. 7 stitches, 8, 9, bandage, tight, pressing, done. The bleeding has stopped. She'll survive. He stood up. His hands were covered in blood up to his elbows. The 3rd time in 6 weeks. He was used to it. He turned to the captive. Eowyn was already interrogating her, harshly, quietly. The captive remained silent. Eowyn struck her once. The captive spat out blood. She remained silent. Eowyn raised her hand for a second blow. Ethan said, "Stop." Eowyn turned around, eyes like flint. He said, "Give me a minute." He walked over to the captive, crouched down, looked at her. Young, 25, maybe 27, Skinny, muscular, scars on her arms. Professional, from training, not a street thug. Trained, sent, by someone. He looked into her eyes, dilated pupils. But not from fear, from poison. He saw it. A drop of blood from her nose, left nostril. A tremor in her fingers. Slight, uncontrollable. A rapid pulse in her neck. Too rapid for a person lying down. She had been poisoned before she came here. She carried the poison within her. He told Eowyn, "She's dying. Poison, look. Her nose, her hands, her pulses. She took the poison before she arrived, if she couldn't kill herself. To die on her own. To leave no traces. To prevent interrogation." Eowyn looked. She saw. Her stony face grew a shade grayer. Ethan turned to the captive. He said quietly, "You're dying. The poison is already working. I can help. I can slow it down. If you tell me who sent you." The captive looked at him, for the first time. Before that, she had been looking right through him, as if through a wall. Now she saw him, a man. The first man she had ever seen in her life. Her eyes widened even more, not from the poison, from shock. She opened her mouth, closed it. Then she spoke. One word, a name. Cross. Eowyn straightened up. Ren behind her grabbed her bow. Cross. Ethan didn't know that name, but from the camp's reaction, he understood. It was a bad name, a very bad one. The captive closed her eyes. Her body began to shake. Convulsions, small ones, then big ones. Ethan worked. He turned her on her side, cleared her airways, held her head. There was nothing else he could do. He didn't know the poison. He didn't know the antidote. He didn't know how long. He just held her, like he held patients in Portland, the ones he couldn't save, the ones who slipped away in his arms. He looked into her face and didn't look away, because that was the last thing he could give her, his presence. When she stopped trembling and her eyes went glassy, he closed her eyelids, quietly, out of habit, just as he had done dozens of times. He stood up. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from anger. Quiet, deep, a paramedic's anger. Anger at those who send young women to die with poison in their blood just to kill one person. He turned to Eowyn. "Who are the crosses?" Eowyn answered, "The house, one of the 7. Duchess Adelaide Cross. The head, strong, smart, dangerous. She knows you're here, and she's decided you shouldn't be." Ethan nodded. The first attempt, not the last. He knew it. The ambulance had repeat calls, too. Patients who tried again and again, until they succeeded or until someone arrived in time. It was the same here, only the patient was himself. That evening, he called a council, for the first time. He wasn't the one deciding. He wasn't the one in command, but he asked. Eowyn, Ren, Hanason. 4 sat by the fire. He spoke, slowly, choosing his words. "We can't stay here any longer. The camp is exposed. 3 today, 10 tomorrow. The army the day after tomorrow. We have to leave. The question is where," Hanason said. "The capital." He shook his head. "In the capital, I'll be in a cage. A golden cage, but a cage." Ren said. "The mountains. To the north. Far away, hard to find." Eowyn shook her head. "Winter. In the mountains in winter, it's death." Silence. The fire crackled. Ethan thought. He weighed his options. Like in an ambulance when there are 2 routes and both are bad. The first, through traffic. The second, through an area where they're shooting. "You choose the one with the better odds," he said. "The capital, but not into a cage. To Seraphine. Under protection, but on my terms. She's already helping. She comes here alone. She listens. She sends supplies. She's not an enemy. She's an ally who needs to be convinced that I'm more useful free than locked up." Eowyn was silent, for a long time. Then she said, "If the queen betrays us, if the court finds out, if the church comes." He nodded. "I know it's a risk, but the risk is greater here. Here, we'll all die. Quietly, with no witnesses. By the knife or by starvation. There, at least, there's a chance." Ren stood up. She walked over to him. She looked down at him. She said, "If we go to the capital, I'm coming with you, always, by your side." An arrow on the string. He looked at her, at the scar across her eyebrow, at her green eyes, at her hands that never trembled, except that first time in the forest when she found him. He said, "I know." She nodded. She sat back down. The matter was settled. Packing took 2 days. They broke camp quietly, quickly, professionally. The Gray sisters knew how to vanish. 2 days later, nothing remained in the clearing but trampled grass and ashes from the campfires. 14 women and 1 man set off south, toward the capital, toward the great which awaited them like a predator awaits its prey, with patience and bared teeth. The journey to the capital took 9 days. The Gray sisters traveled through the forests, along paths not marked on any maps. Ren in the lead, scouting. Eowyn in the center, in command, Ethan between them. Hanason was by his side, always by his side, as if she feared that if she stepped 10 paces away, the visions would return. On the 3rd day of their journey, he saw the first city, from afar, from the top of a hill. Stone walls, towers, smoke from the chimneys, streets, people, women, all women. He knew this in his mind, long ago. But to see it, a whole city, thousands of people, and not a single man, that was different. As if someone had cut out half the picture and glued the rest back together so neatly that the seam was almost invisible. Almost. They skirted the city. Ren led the group through the woods. A 2-hour detour, safe. No one saw them. On the 4th day, it started to rain, cold, autumn rain. Ethan was soaked to the bone within an hour. The jacket they'd given him at the camp was soaked through. He walked, his teeth chattering, and he thought about how in Portland he'd complained about the rain from the window of the ambulance, from a warm, dry vehicle with coffee in the cup holder. Hanason walked beside him, barefoot, on the wet ground, over the rocks, through the mud, not a single scratch. He asked. She didn't answer. She just smiled. That new smile, earthy, warm, as if wet feet were the most normal thing in the world. He took off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. She froze, looked at him, said, "You'll freeze," he said. "I'm wet. You're wet, but I'm heavier. I'll get colder later. Physics, body mass." She didn't understand the word physics, but she didn't take off the jacket. On the 6th day, they encountered a patrol, a royal one, sent by Serafina. 5 female warriors in silver breastplates. They were waiting at the fork in the road, silently, professionally. The patrol commander handed a scroll to Eowyn. Eowyn read it, nodded, passed it to Ethan. He read it, slowly, with difficulty. But he read it. Serafina had written, briefly, precisely, as always. "Lodging is ready. The lower city, not the palace. Safe, quiet. The patrol will escort you. Do not enter through the main gates. There is another way." The other way turned out to be an old aqueduct, a stone tunnel beneath the capital's wall. Low, dark, smelling of dampness and moss. Ethan walked hunched over, his head brushed the ceiling. The hunters walked with ease. They knew this tunnel. They used it. The Gray sisters were not just hunters. They were a network, a secret one, spanning the entire country, with paths that even the crown didn't know about. Or perhaps it knew and allowed it. The capital of Aurelia. He emerged from the tunnel into an alley and stopped. The smell hit him first. Smoke, food, skin, manure, flowers, spices, sweat, all together, thick, heavy, like an emergency room on a Friday night, only 1,000 times worse. Sounds, voices, clatter, the squeak of wheels, music somewhere, strings, an unfamiliar melody, beautiful, sad. He peeked out of the alley, the street, wide, paved with stone, people, dozens, hundreds, women, all of them, vendors, artisans, guards, servants, children, girls, all girls. He stood and watched, and the world around him was full and empty at the same time, full of life, half empty, like a house from which all the furniture had been carried out on one side. Ren pulled the hood over his head, roughly, quickly. "Don't look, don't show your face, let's go." He followed her, hood pulled low, head bowed, hands in his pockets. Once in an ambulance, he'd transported a patient who was wanted by the police. The police were looking for him. He didn't know. He found out later. The patient sat exactly the same way. Hood, head down, hands hidden. Only the patient was hiding from the law. But Ethan was hiding from the world. The place turned out to be a house in the lower city. Old, stone, 2 stories, thick walls, small windows, a sturdy door, bolted from the inside. Inside. Clean, simple. 3 rooms downstairs, 2 upstairs, a hearth, a supply of firewood, food in the pantry, plenty. Serafina hadn't skimped. Another scroll lay on the table. He unrolled it, read it. Tomorrow, in the morning, I will come, alone. The hunters settled in quickly. Guards at the doors and windows. Habit. Hana-san went upstairs, lay down. She fell asleep instantly. The journey had worn her out. Ethan could see it. 9 days of walking for a girl who had spent half her life in the temple without moving. Her body was sustained by stubbornness and something else, on that quiet desperation with which she clung to the present. Suri and Miel settled into a corner. The girls huddled close together. Suri held a small flame in her palm, small, warm, a nightlight. Miel looked at it and fell asleep. Ethan stood in the doorway and watched them. 2 girls, 14 and 16, in a world that was hunting their protector, he thought. In Portland, he hadn't had children. He hadn't had time. It hadn't worked out, and here suddenly he had them. Not by blood, by choice, because of how Suri followed him around camp every day, because of how Miel brought him a bowl of food in the mornings and stood there until he started eating. They chose him, like choosing a pack, and he chose them back. Ren sat down next to him on the threshold, bow on her lap, eyes on the street. She was silent. He was silent. Then she said, quietly, "The capital. I haven't been here in 5 years, not since I left for the Gray Sisters." He asked, "Why did you leave?" She answered, "There was nothing to eat. The food ran out at the shelter. The sisters fed us." He was silent. Then he said, "Now we have a pantry, full, and a roof, and a door with a bolt." Ren looked at him for a long time. Then she said quietly, "This isn't my home. I don't have a home." He said, "Now you do." She turned away quickly. He didn't look. He knew what he'd see. He'd seen it 1,000 times. When you tell a homeless patient there's a place at the shelter. When you tell a lonely old man his daughter is coming to pick him up. That moment when a person who long ago stopped expecting anything good suddenly hears that something good has arrived and doesn't know where to look. He stood up. He went inside. He checked on everyone. Eowyn was sleeping in a chair by the hearth. Her leg was stretched out. The bandage was in place. Her breathing was steady. The hunters were at their posts. Miel and Suri were asleep. Hana-san was upstairs, quiet, no tremors. He walked through the house, checked the windows, the doors, the bolts, the supplies, water, firewood. A paramedic checks the car before a shift, oil, gas, equipment, oxygen. Another world, the same habits. He lay down on the hide by the wall, closed his eyes. Tomorrow is Serafina. Tomorrow the real work begins. Not survival in the forest, not escape, real work. In a city where thousands of people are sick and are treated with prayers and herbs, where magic replaces medicine and burns those who use it, where he is the only one who knows what antiseptics and anesthesia are. He closed his eyes and thought. 8 years of night shifts in Portland were just a warm-up. The real shift is only just beginning. Serafina arrived at dawn, alone, as promised, without a crown, without armor, in a simple dark dress with a high collar. Her hair was hidden under a scarf. She looked like an ordinary resident of the lower city, except for her posture and her eyes. Those eyes couldn't be hidden under any scarf. Ethan opened the door, let her in, closed it, bolted it. Ren stood by the window, bow in hand. Serafina looked at her. Ren didn't move. The 2 women sized each other up in a split second. The queen and the hunter. Ice and fire. Both decided not to touch the other, for now. They sat down at the table. The 3 of them, Ethan, Serafina, Eowyn. Ren by the window. Hana-san was upstairs. He heard her footsteps. She was pacing, quietly, back and forth. Visions, louder than usual today. He'd noticed it in her eyes that morning, cloudy, distant. A bad day. They happen. Serafina spoke first, straight to the point. No greetings, no small talk. The House of Cross knows. 3 more great houses suspect it. The Church of the Foremothers has sent a messenger. Supreme Mother Yolanda demands an audience. The tone of the demand is such that refusal is tantamount to war. In the south, General Kang Ji-yun has reinforced the army. The reason is unknown. Maybe it's related to him, maybe not. Time is short. Ethan listened. His proposal is a symptom. He was piecing together the picture. A political organism. Sick. Seriously. Multiple foci of inflammation. An autoimmune reaction. The body of the state is attacking itself, and him. He is like a foreign body, a virus, or a cure. It depends on your perspective, he said. I have a proposal.
Serafina raised an eyebrow. He continued.
I need a place. In the lower city, open, accessible. I want to treat people openly, without hiding. She was silent, waiting. He continued. People here are sick. I saw them on the way. Women with sick children, old women with wounds that won't heal, coughs, fevers, infections. You heal with magic. Magic is expensive. Magic burns the healer. The poor don't get treated. The poor die. I can heal without magic, for free. I need a place and protection, Serafina said. If you come out into the open, the whole world will find out. He nodded. Exactly. Right now, I'm a secret. A secret can be stolen, killed, hidden. If I openly heal people in the lower city, I'll stop being a secret. I'll become a fact. A fact is harder to kill. Because a fact has witnesses. Hundreds, thousands. People I've healed. They will be my protection. Not walls, not guards. People. Silence. Eowyn looked at him. A stony face, not a trace of emotion. But in his eyes, he saw. Something like pride, Serafina thought. He saw the process. The cogs behind those gray eyes, quick, precise. He was calculating risks, benefits, consequences. 10 steps ahead, like a chess player, or like a surgeon before a complex operation. He knew that look. He used to look that way himself when making decisions in the ambulance. Take the patient to the nearest hospital without the right department, or to the one farther away with the right one, but risking not making it there. Serafina said, The church will come for you on the very first day, he replied. Let them come. I'll be bandaging a wound, or flushing a child's eyes, or stitching a cut. Let them try to take a doctor away from a patient, in front of the crowd. Let's see how that looks. Serafina looked at him, and for the first time in all their meetings, he saw on her face the expression he knew best. Surprise, not cold, warm. The surprise of someone who had encountered something they hadn't expected, and that they liked. She said, You think like a politician. He shook his head. I think like a medic. A politician thinks about how to gain power. I think about how to get them to let me work. She paused. Then she said, All right, I'll find a place, the lower city, 3 streets from the market. There's an old house that belonged to the Order of Healers. It's been empty for 20 years, ever since the order was disbanded. The walls are sturdy, the rooms are large, a courtyard for waiting. I'll provide security, 4 guards. Not for you, for order. Officially, it will look like my personal charity. The crown helps the poor, nothing unusual. A man inside, that's already unusual. But by the time the church gets its act together, you'll have a reputation. Ethan nodded. Thank you. She stood up, walked to the door, stopped, didn't turn around, spoke to the wall. Yesterday I slept 6 hours, for the first time in 2 years, without a migraine. He didn't answer. She left. Eowyn looked at the closed door. Then at him, she said. She won't come back as a queen, he replied. I know, Eowyn said. Be careful. Not with her, with what you do to people when they're around you. They start to breathe, and then they can't stop. He looked at her. She wasn't talking about Seraphine. She was talking about everyone. About Ren, who had laid her bow on the ground. About Hansen, who had slept without dreams for the first time in 7 years. About Suri, with her little spark. About Miel, who was breathing deeply. About herself, who for the first time in 30 years had let someone bandage her leg. 3 days to prepare. Ethan worked, Ren helped, so efficiently. They went to the Order's old house. Serafina hadn't lied. The walls were sturdy, stone, thick. The rooms were large, dusty, abandoned, but intact. He divided the space. Reception, examination room, room for the seriously injured, storage, clean zone, dirty zone, boundaries, order, flow. Like in an emergency room. Entrance, triage, treatment. Exit, standard protocol, works everywhere. In Portland and in a world without men, he trained 3 hunters, Ren, 2 more volunteers, the basics. Wash hands, before everything, after everything. Boiled water, only, always. Bandages, how to apply, how to remove, how to wash. how to dry, boil, alcohol, where, how much, why. They learned quickly, got used to discipline, hunters, team, order. It was familiar to them. Only before, order was for killing, now for healing. Hana-san helped in her own way. On good days, she sat in the reception area and talked to the future space. It sounds strange, but she explained, the place remembers. This house remembers the healers. 20 years of emptiness, but the walls remember the hands that healed. Ethan didn't believe in the memory of walls, but he believed in her, in the way she walked through the rooms and touched the stones, slowly, as if reading something with her fingers. After her rounds, the house became, he couldn't find the words, warmer, not in temperature, somehow different, as if the house agreed, accepted them, let them in. Opening day, morning. Ethan stood at the door of the Order's old house. A sign hung above the door. Ren had carved it, roughly, but legibly. One word, infirmary. 4 of Serafina's guards stood nearby, silent, in silver breastplates, with the crown insignia, protection, or surveillance, or both. Ren behind him, bow on her shoulder, her face was stony. The first hour, no one. The street watched. People walked by, glanced, whispered. He stood, waited. Patience. There were long nights in the ambulance, hours without calls. You sit, you wait. You know the call will come. It always comes. It came. An hour and 20 minutes later. An old woman, small, hunchbacked, her hand was wrapped in a rag, dirty, brown with dried blood. She approached the door, looked at the sign, looked at the guards, looked at Ren. Then she saw him, froze. Her mouth opened, her eyes widened. He saw the word forming on her lips. Unspoken, forming, like a prayer or like a curse. A man. He stepped toward her, slowly, hands in plain sight, like on the first day with Ren, like always. He said, "Hello, I'm a doctor. Show me your hand." She didn't move. 5 seconds. 10. Then she held out her hand, slowly, as if in a dream. He took it, carefully. He untied the cloth. Beneath it was a wound, an old one, infected, pus, swelling, inflammation all over her forearm. Another week, and it would be blood poisoning. He led her inside, sat her down, rinsed it, cleaned it, stitched it up, bandaged it, gave her some herbal tea to drink, explained, to come every 2 days, to change the bandage. She sat and watched him the whole time while he worked, not at his hands, at his face, as if at a miracle or a dream. When he finished, she stood up, bowed, low, so low that he was afraid she would fall. He caught her by the elbow, said, "Don't, I'm just flying." She looked at him with wet old eyes and said, "I am 73 years old. I have lived my whole life in a world without men. I thought I would die in a world without men. Thank you for proving me wrong." She left. An hour later, 8 people were standing at the door. By evening, 23. Ethan worked. Ren helped. The hunters helped. Hana-san sat in the corner and watched those who were waiting. She noticed those who were worse off. She pointed them out to Ethan, without words, with a gesture. This one, first. Her visions worked here too. She felt other people's pain as if it were her own. Not mystically, literally. He treated them until dark. Cuts, burns, dislocations, chronic pain, coughs, fevers, skin diseases, toothaches. One, that he could. He pulled it out, with forceps, quickly. The woman screamed, then she laughed, then she cried, then she thanked him. He didn't count the patients. He didn't have time. By nightfall, he was sitting on the floor of the clinic, back against the wall. His hands were shaking, not from the cold, from exhaustion. 23 patients a day. In the Portland ambulance, his record was 19 per shift. Here he'd broken it, without a car, without equipment, without a partner, without coffee from a vending machine, with a bucket of boiled water and a needle and alcohol. Ren sat down next to him. She handed him some bread. He took it. He ate slowly. She said, "There will be more tomorrow." He nodded. He knew. She said, "You can't treat the whole city by yourself." He nodded. He knew that too. She was silent for a moment. Then she said, "Then teach others. Just like you taught us to wash our hands in boil water, teach. More hands, more help." He looked at her red hair, at the scar across her eyebrow, at her green eyes in which the light from the oil lamp shone. She was right, absolutely. He couldn't heal this world on his own, but he could teach this world to heal itself. He said, "Thank you for coming back." She looked at him. She didn't understand. He explained, "Back then, in the forest, when you brought the hair and I said, 'Thank you for coming back.' You remember?" She nodded quickly. She turned away. He said, "I meant, I'm glad you're here. Not because you're useful, because you're needed by you, here, with me." Silence. A long one. Then Ren stood up. She said hoarsely, "I'll check the posts." And she left quickly. He didn't call after her. He knew. She needed time. He'd seen it many times in the ambulance. When a person who'd never been valued suddenly hears that they're needed, not for their skills, for themselves, it takes time to process that. Ethan Reed sat on the floor of his first clinic in the capital of a world without men. Behind the wall, the city slept. In the city, thousands of women. Tomorrow they would come to his door and he would treat them, just as he had in Portland, one, by name, because he doesn't know any other way. And because that's exactly how it works. Not on everyone, on each one. Chapter summary. Serafina approved the plan for an open clinic. Ethan secured the building of the former Order of Healers in the lower city. He prepared the space and trained his assistants in basic medicine. On opening day, he saw 23 patients. The clinic was up and running. Ren suggested training more people. Ethan told Ren that he needed her not for her skills, but for who she was. Serafina admitted that for the first time in 2 years, she had slept without a migraine. The clinic operated for 2 months, every day, without days off. Ethan stopped counting patients after the first week. It had become pointless to count. There were hundreds of them. The line began before dawn. Women came from the lower city, then from the middle city, then from the upper city. First the poor, then those who were wealthier but couldn't afford magical treatment, then maids from the great houses, in secret, with their faces covered, hiding from their mistresses. Ethan taught, as Ren had suggested, 6 students in the first month, 12 in the second. Women from the lower city, ordinary, without magic, those whom Celestina's world considered useless. He taught them what he knew: how to wash hands, boil water, clean wounds, change bandages, take a pulse, listen for breathing, signs of infection, signs of blood loss, signs of shock, when to call them, when to manage on their own. The basic 3: green, yellow, red. 3 categories, just like in an ambulance. Can wait, urgent, critical. They learned eagerly, like the hungry eat, because they were hungry. All their lives they'd been told that without magic, they were nothing. And then a man from the myths came along and said that magic wasn't necessary. What was needed were clean hands and a clear head. It turned their world upside down, not politically, deeper, at the very foundation, where a woman decides who she is and what she can do. Hana-san changed more than anyone else. 2 months with Ethan. 2 months in the present. The visions didn't stop. They kept coming. Every day, snippets of the future, fragments of the past, faces she didn't know, places she hadn't seen. But now, she could tell the difference. Hers from others, now from later. The anchor was working. Ethan was the anchor. Not magically, physically. His voice, his presence. The way he spoke to her every morning. "Good morning. You're here. I'm here. What day is it today?" And she would answer. And the answer would bring her back to the present. Like a rope brings a diver back to the surface. One evening she came to him, her eyes clear, completely clear. And she said, "I saw something." Not a fragment, the whole picture. He grew alert. She rarely saw whole pictures. When she did, it was important. She said, "A woman, in the south, a general, short hair, scars on her arms. She found something. In an old temple, underground, a book, or a scroll. Something ancient. And she's crying. The general is crying. I've never seen generals who cry." Ethan sat down. A general in the south, Kang Ji-yun. Serafina had mentioned her. A rebel, a schismatic. She raised an army against the crown, or against the church, or against both. No one knew for sure. Hana-sun said so. She found the truth. About the silence. Not all of it. A part. And that part turned out to be enough to make the general cry. He thought about it all night. A piece of the puzzle, another one. The silence of the fathers, the ritual, women in a circle, fire, silence. And now the general in the South who had found the evidence, who had raised a rebellion not for power but for the truth. The picture was coming together slowly, like a 1,000-piece puzzle, but it was coming together. Serafina came twice a week, always in the evening, always alone. Their conversations had changed. At first she came for a shoulder massage and silence. Now she came for conversation.
She told him about the great houses, about the church, about politics, about how the state held itself together.
On a word of honor, on fear, on habit. She spoke, and he listened. He asked questions, the same ones. How much? When? Where? How fast? The history of the world. She answered, and every time after answering she fell silent, as if hearing her own words from the outside for the first time, as if speaking them aloud made them more real. Once she came later than usual. Her eyes were red, not from tears, from insomnia. The migraine had returned, he could see it. Her right temple. She pressed her fingers to her temple in an unconscious gesture. He sat her down, massaged her shoulders. She was silent. Then she said, Supreme Mother Yolanda demanded that you be handed over to the church, officially, in front of witnesses, at the Council of Houses. I refused. She said there would be consequences. Ethan didn't stop his hands. He kept massaging. What consequences? Serafina said. She will excommunicate me from the blood of the foremothers, declare me a heretic. Half the houses will switch to her side, not because they believe, because it's profitable. He stopped, took his hands away, sat down across from her, looked into her eyes. Gray, tired, beautiful. He said, You're risking the throne for my sake, she replied. I'm risking the throne for what you're doing. That's different. Silence, a long one. He said, Thank you. She shook her head. Don't thank me. Heal me. You promised. He nodded. I promised. She stood up, walked to the door, and stopped. As always, a habit. To stop. Not to turn around. To say something to the wall. She said, Tomorrow is the great council of houses. The winter ball. All the houses, all the heads, the church, the court. You will go with me, openly, as a guest of the crown. This is not a request, he replied. I know. She left. Ren came in a minute later. She had heard, thin walls, or keen hearing, or both. She said, The ball, you, there, in front of everyone. He nodded. She said, They'll devour you, he said. Perhaps, she said. I'm going with you, he said. I know, she said. I'm serious. He looked at her, said, Me too. Hana-san came down from above, quietly, bare feet on the stone steps. She said, I've seen this evening many times. Lights, music, you in the center, everyone watching. And then, she fell silent. He asked, What then? She shook her head. I don't know. There's darkness there. I never see what's beyond the darkness. He walked over to her, took her hands, cold fingers as always. He said, Darkness is just a place you haven't been yet. We'll go there together. She squeezed his fingers hard. For someone so small, she had an iron grip. Winter ball. The grand throne room of the Aurelius Palace. 1,000 candles. Ethan counted 16 chandeliers, each with dozens of lights. The light was golden, warm. White stone walls, columns reaching the ceiling 5 stories high. On the columns, the banners of the great houses. 7 colors, 7 crests. 7 families who ruled the continent as a wolf pack rules the forest, with fangs and hierarchy. He stood at the entrance in simple, dark clothes. Serafina had suggested formal attire. He refused, not out of modesty, out of calculation. Formal attire would mean he was playing their game. Simple clothes meant he wasn't playing, that he wasn't here as a piece on a board, as a guest. Who goes about his business and couldn't care less about their glitz? Ren stood behind his right shoulder, not in hunting leather, in clean clothes, but with a knife at her belt. Luke stayed downstairs. They don't let you into the ballroom with a bow. She stood as she always stood, straight, quiet, ready. Hanson on her left shoulder, in white, long black hair combed back, barefoot. Even here, the courtiers looked at her feet and whispered. She didn't notice and didn't care. Serafina was waiting for them on the top step of the throne platform. In a moon-silver dress, her hair down. It was the first time he'd seen her with her hair down, a silver waterfall reaching her waist. She was so beautiful that the hall fell silent when she turned toward them. Not because of magic, because of her. Because of the way the light fell on her pale skin. Because of the way her gray eyes found him through 100 paces of the crowd and wouldn't let go. He walked across the hall. Hundreds of eyes, all on him. Silence radiated from him like ripples on water. Women froze. Conversations broke off. Glasses froze halfway to their lips. He walked and heard his own breathing. Steady. 68 beats per minute. A working pulse. In the ambulance, there were moments when you'd enter the emergency room with a stretcher and the whole room would fall silent. Because on the stretcher was something that made everyone realize the night would be long. It was the same here. Only on the stretcher was he himself. Serafina held out her hand. He climbed the steps, stood next to her. She turned toward the hall, spoke, a voice like steel, every word worth its weight in gold. She introduced him, officially. Ethan Reed, guest of the crown, physician, healer of the lower city. Under the protection of the throne, under the protection of the law. Any attempt on his life is an attempt on the crown. The hall was silent. A second, 2, 3, then a whisper, like the surf, growing louder, from all sides. He caught snippets. A man, a real one, alive, impossible. Prophecy, heresy, threat, hope, all words at once. The entire spectrum of reactions from sacred horror to political calculation. He stood, hands hanging loosely at his sides. He looked out at the hall, not defiantly, not obsequiously, like a paramedic looks at the emergency room at the start of his shift, calmly, ready. Who's first? The music started playing. The ball continued, or pretended to continue. People moved, danced, talked, but every conversation was about him. Every glance returned to him. He felt it as physical pressure, from all sides. And then a little girl approached him, small, 5 years old, maybe 6. The dress was too big for her. The hem dragged across the floor, dark curls, big eyes. She made her way toward him through the crowd of adults who parted before her, not because she was important, but because they were too busy to notice. She reached the steps, she looked up at him, and whispered, a loud child's whisper that the entire front hall could hear, that she was scared, that there were too many people, that her mom was far away and angry, that she wanted to go to her mom, but her mom was at the other end of the hall. Ethan looked at the girl, then at the hall, then he crouched down, right on the steps of the throne platform, in front of the entire court, in front of the 7 great houses, in front of the church of the foremothers, in front of 1,000 candles and 100 pairs of eyes. He crouched down in front of the 5-year-old girl and said, quietly, in that same voice, the one for patience and shock, only gentler. He offered to carry her to her mother, but on one condition. If anyone asked who she was along the way, she was to answer that she was the boss. The girl looked at him, blinked, nodded. Seriously, like a grown-up making a deal. He picked her up, easily. She weighed as much as a cat, maybe less. He stood up, turned toward the hall, and walked. Across the entire hall, through the crowd, past duchesses in ball gowns, past generals in armor, past priestesses in ceremonial robes. The man from the legend carried another man's daughter in his arms across the ballroom. One of the old aristocrats stepped toward him, tall, thin, eyes like a hawk's. She asked, "Who is this girl?" The girl lifted her head from his shoulder, looked at the old woman and said, very seriously, very loudly, "I'm in charge." Silence. A second. 2. And the hall burst into laughter. Not polite, not forced, genuine. The kind of laughter that comes when something unexpected and pure breaks through a wall of tension. He carried the girl to her mother, a young woman. Her face was white with horror. The daughter approached the man from the legend, the very one, the one who... Ethan handed the girl over, he said quietly to the mother. "She's brave. Don't scold her." The mother nodded. She couldn't speak. The girl wrapped her arms around her mother's neck and whispered in her ear, "Mom, he's warm." Ethan turned and walked back. Halfway there, he heard it. First, a single pair of hands, then two, then 10, then the entire hall. Applause. For the first time in 2,500 years, this world applauded a man. Not for his strength, not for magic, not for power, for the fact that he crouched down in front of a child and carried her to her mother. He looked at Serafina. Across the entire hall, she was standing on the platform, her hands clasped to her chest, her face. He could see it even from a distance. The mask cracked. Not for a second, completely. Serafina Valeros, queen of the Holy Empire of Aurelia, looked at him, and in her eyes was what he saw in patients who are told their test results are good after a long illness. Hope that had stopped hiding. The evening went on. He talked to dozens of people. Everyone came up to him. Everyone wanted to see, to hear, to touch. He gently put a stop to the latter. No, thank you, we can just talk. They talked. About illnesses, about wounds, about children who don't wake up with magic, about bloodlines that are dying out, about fear. He listened. He nodded. He answered when he could. He referred them to the clinic when necessary. He worked, even at the ball, even in the grand hall. He worked. A woman approached him, tall, elegant, dark hair styled impeccably, a dark blue, expensive. Her eyes were gray-green, cold, calm, like the surface of a lake where the bottom cannot be seen. She smiled, beautifully, calculatingly. She said, "Duchess Adelaide Cross, pleased to meet you." He didn't flinch, didn't show that he knew that name, that he knew about knives and poison and 3 dead women in the woods. He said, "Ethan Reed, likewise." She spoke, softly, intelligent, about his work, about the clinic, about how impressed she was, about what a miracle it was. He listened and read her, like on an ambulance, pulse steady, breathing steady, pupils normal. Not a single sign of agitation, not a single one. This is not a nervous person. This is a professional, like him, only on the other side of the table. She said, "We need to talk, alone, soon." "I have a proposal that will interest you," he replied. "I'm always ready to talk, but I don't meet alone. Security." She smiled, broadly. "Of course, I understand." And she left, smoothly, like a snake slithering into the grass, without a sound and without a trace. Ren stood nearby, tense, like a bowstring. She said through clenched teeth, "It's her, Cross, the one who sent the killers." He nodded. "I know," Ren said. "I can kill her right now with a knife. 3 steps. She won't make it." He put his hand on her shoulder. He said, "No, not here, not like this." Ren looked at him. Her green eyes were burning. He said quietly, "We're not killers. We heal, even from them." She clenched her teeth, but backed away. The ball continued. Ethan stood by a column. He looked out at the hall, at the dancers, at the laughing, at the whispering, at those who feared him and those who admired him, at Serafina, who had put her mask back on and was having a political conversation with the head of the house, at Hansen, who stood in the corner and stared into space in front of her. Visions, right now, in the middle of the ball. He walked over to her, touched her hand, said, "You're here. I'm here. What day is it today?" She blinked, came back to herself, looked at him. Said, "Wednesday," he smiled. "Wednesday, that's right." After the ball, events accelerated. Like an ambulance when a quiet night suddenly explodes with 3 calls at once. The clinic had expanded. 3 rooms instead of 1. 30 students. A line every day from dawn. Ethan worked, taught, healed, slept 4 hours a day, as usual. On the 3rd day after the ball, priestesses came to the clinic. 5 of them, in the dark red robes of the Church of the Great Mothers. The eldest stood at the entrance. She unrolled a scroll. She read aloud, loudly, so the line could hear. "In the name of the Supreme Mother Iolanda, a man is a desecration. The place where he heals is heresy. Any woman who accepts his touch is excommunicated from the blood of the primordial mothers." The line froze. The women exchanged glances. Some stepped back. They left. But most remained, because their children were in pain, or their hands, or their backs. Pain is stronger than fear of the church. Ethan had known this for a long time. He stepped out to the priestesses. Calmly, hands in plain sight, voice steady, he spoke. Inside is a woman with a burn on her leg. The burn is infected. If it isn't treated, in 2 days her blood will become poisoned. In 4, she will die. You can stand here and read the scroll, or you can come in and help me clean the wound. Choose. The senior priestess looked at him for a long time, the scroll in her hands, a decision on her face. Then she rolled up the scroll, turned around, left. The other 4 followed her. The crowd exhaled. Ethan went back inside. He cleaned the wound. The woman with the burn survived. The church will return. He knew. But today, they left. And every day when they leave and he stays, it's a victory, a small one, but a victory. A week later, a letter arrived. Not from Serafina, not from the church. Unsigned, unsealed. 3 lines. General Kang Ji-yun requests a meeting. Place and time. Alone. Unarmed. No witnesses. He showed the letter to Serafina. She read it. Her face froze. She said, "A trap," he said. "Maybe," she said. "Don't go," he said. She found the truth about the silence. Part of the truth. "I need to know." Serafina looked at him. Gray eyes, steel and ice. She said, "If you go and don't come back, I'll burn the South to the ground." He looked at her. He said, "Don't burn it. I'll come back." She turned away. He saw her fingers turn white as they clenched the armrest of the chair. The meeting. An abandoned temple on the outskirts of the city. Night. Ethan came alone, as requested. Ren sat on the roof of the neighboring house, with a bow. Not alone means not alone, he warned Ren. Don't shoot unless he yells. She promised, reluctantly. Kang Ji-yun was waiting inside, standing by the broken altar. Tall, broad-shouldered, short black hair, scars on her arms, many, old and new. Her clothes were simple, military, no insignia. But everything about her marked her as a commander. Her posture, her gaze, the way she stood, controlling the entire space around her. She looked at him, appraisingly, the way a fighter assesses an opponent. Then she spoke. Her voice was low, steady. "You're smaller than I expected," he replied. "I hear that a lot." She didn't smile. She said, "I found something. In a temple to the south, under the ruins, a scroll, ancient, 2,000 years old, written by the hand of the first Supreme Mother. It contains the truth about the silence." She fell silent. Then she continued, "The silence of the fathers. It is not the gods' punishment, not a catastrophe, not a plague. It is a ritual. The first grandmothers performed it themselves, consciously, intentionally. They killed every man on the continent in a single night." She said it evenly, without a tremor, like a soldier reporting casualties. But Ethan saw it, her hands, a slight tremor, almost imperceptible. She held herself the way people hold themselves when they've learned something that has made the world no longer the same. He asked, "Why?" She answered, "Self-defense. In that era, men burned women for magic, for blood, for the gift. Bonfires, thousands of bonfires. The foremothers received the moon gift, power from the ley lines, and decided that the only way to stop the destruction was to remove the source of destruction. Men, all of them, all at once, forever. Silence. An abandoned temple, moonlight streaming through the broken roof. He stood and thought. Self-defense that became genocide. That became a religion. That became the foundation of civilization. 2,500 years of lies. Generations of women who believed that men had disappeared by the will of the gods. But in reality, they had been killed. By their grandmothers. By their great-grandmothers. By their foremothers. Out of fear. Out of pain. Out of despair. He understood. He didn't excuse it, but he understood. In the ambulance, he saw what fear does to people, how it cripples them, how it forces them to make decisions they can never wash away. He asked, "And the thinning of the ley lines?" She nodded, also in her robe. "The world isn't designed for a single pole. The ley lines fed on the resonance of 2 principles, male and female. By removing one, the great mothers slowly killed the other. The world is dying. It has been for 2,000 years. Slowly, quietly, like a patient whose one lung has been clamped off. For a while, the other one manages. Then it stops, he asked. The church knows, she replied. 6 generations. The Supreme Mothers pass the truth from one to the next and hide it. Because if the truth comes out, everything will collapse. Faith, order, power, peace. He paused. Then he said, I need that scroll. She looked at him. She said, Why? He replied, To fix what was broken. She was silent for a long time. Then she said, I've been waging war for 12 years. I started a rebellion because I learned part of the truth. I lost hundreds of sisters. You come along and say, Fix it, as if it were a kitchen faucet. He replied, No, as if it were a patient in intensive care. Difficult, long, painful, but possible, if we start. She looked at him. A minute, 2. Then she pulled a bundle from her bosom. She held it out. He took it, heavy, ancient. She said, If you betray me, I'll kill you. If you don't betray me, I'll die for you. Choose quickly. He looked at her, at the scars, at her hands, at the face that hadn't known peace for 12 years. He said, I choose to do neither. I choose for you to live. She froze. Something broke in her face, something that had stood like a wall for 12 years. She laughed, quietly, hoarsely, like someone who had forgotten how to do it and was learning again. Then she said, You're impossible. He replied, People tell me that a lot too. He returned to the clinic toward morning. Ren came down from the roof, silently. He showed her the bundle. She looked, didn't ask, trusted. Hana-san was waiting inside, awake, eyes clear, clearer than ever. She said, You found it. He nodded. She said, I know, I saw it. Tonight, everything, the whole thing. Not fragments, the entire story, from beginning to end. The women in the circle, the fire, the men's screams, the silence afterward. 2,500 years of silence. And him, standing at the altar, with a scroll in his hands. The scroll changed everything. Ethan read it with Hana-san, slowly, word by word, an ancient language, different grammar, different symbols, but Hana-san knew it from somewhere, from visions, from dreams, from the memory of the world that flowed through her like a river through stones. The scroll described the ritual in detail, the place, the first altar, the mountains north of the capital, where the ley lines converge at a single point, the heart of the world. The ritual demanded blood, much blood. 13 primordial mothers gave their lives to burn the masculine principle out of the world. 13 deaths for millions. The mathematics of genocide, cold, precise, merciless. But at the end of the scroll, there was something else. A postscript, in a different handwriting, a later one. Someone from the subsequent generations of Supreme Mothers had added it. The ritual is reversible. If both principles meet at the first altar, if the blood remembers, the bloodlines will revive. The world will regain its choice. Not men. A choice. Ethan sat and stared at those lines, and he thought about Han-san's prophecy. The one who was before the silence will come, and the blood will remember. Not a metaphor, an instruction, a roadmap. Someone knew long ago that a man would come one day, and that they would need to go to the first altar, and that the world could be fixed. He gathered everyone, Serafina, Han-san, Ren, Kang Ji-yun, who had come to the capital in secret, in a cloak, with a knife under her clothes and the face of a person who walks into the jaws of a beast willingly. Eowyn, Lyra. He hadn't told them about her yet. A princess, 17 years old, Serafina's younger sister, blonde hair, freckles, eyes that never stayed still. She showed up at the clinic a week after it opened, not as a patient, just out of curiosity. She walked around, she touched everything, she asked questions. 100 questions an hour. What is this? What is this for? How does it work? Why boil it? What is an infection? Can I see it? Ethan answered, every single one, patiently. Because she wasn't just asking, she understood, instantly. An engineer's mind. She saw his wound irrigation system and 2 days later brought a blueprint for a pump that would supply boiling water continuously. He looked at the blueprint, then at her. He said, in Portland, whole factories of people made things like that. And you're alone. You're not defective. You're 200 years ahead of your time. Lyra walked around smiling at the wall for a week. Now she worked at the infirmary every day, designing, building, improving, without magic, with her hands and her head. 6 people at the table, and him. 7. He placed a scroll before them. He told them everything, from the beginning. Silence. The ritual, the foremothers, genocide, bloodlines, thinning, reversibility, the first altar. The silence in the room was so thick that he could hear the candle wick burning. Serafina turned pale, more so than usual, which seemed impossible. She sat motionless, hands on the table, fingers white. She knew, not from the scroll, from somewhere else. Maybe she'd suspected it for a long time. Maybe she'd sensed it. Maybe she'd seen fragments in the secret archives. But it's one thing to suspect. It's another to hear it spoken aloud, in front of witnesses. Kang Jiun was silent. She already knew, but hearing it a second time wasn't any easier. Ren sat like a statue, her face unmoving, hands under the table. Ethan knew she was clenching her fists so tightly her nails were cutting into her palms. Hana-san was crying, quietly, soundlessly. Tears streamed down, and she didn't wipe them away. Lyra sat with her mouth open. Then she closed it. Then she spoke. It turns out that our faith, our entire civilization, is built on... She didn't finish. She couldn't. Eowyn finished for her. On blood and lies. Yes, just like everything else humans have built. Ethan gave them time, a minute, 5, 10. He didn't rush them, didn't comfort them, didn't explain. Just sat there, waiting. Just like he'd waited in Portland when he told the relatives that the patient hadn't survived. You speak, then you're silent, for as long as it takes. Because words come later. First, silence is needed. 10 minutes later, Serafina looked up. She spoke. What to do? Her voice was steady, steely. The queen had returned. He replied, the first altar. We're going there. Me and those who will come with me. The reverse ritual. Not to bring the men back, to give the world back its choice. So the ley lines might come alive. So that children are born as the world intended them to be. Boys and girls, Serafina said. The church won't allow it. Yolanda would rather destroy the altar than let the truth come out. He nodded. I know, Kang Jiun said. My army will cover the road, from the south. Serafina looked at her. For the first time ever. 2 women, the queen and the rebel, enemies for 12 years. They looked at each other across the table. Kang Jiun said, we both know the truth. We both know what needs to be done. The war between us ended the moment he placed the scroll on this table. Serafina was silent. Then she nodded. A single movement, brief, like a signature on a treaty. Ren said, the Grey Sisters know the mountains, every trail. We will guide you, Hana-san said. I will see the path, ahead of time, the dangers, the ambushes. I will see them, Lyra said. I will build what is needed. If the altar is destroyed, I will repair it, with my own hands, Eowyn said. I am too old to go into the mountains. Everyone looked at her, she continued. But I will go, because someone must make sure this boy doesn't forget to eat. Ethan looked at them. 6 women, each with her own pain, each with her own strength, each ready to go into the mountains in winter to face the church that wants to destroy them, for the sake of truth, for the sake of peace, for his sake. No, not for his sake. Beside him, this was different, more important. They weren't following him, they were walking with him, like a team, like an ambulance crew. Everyone in their place, everyone doing their part. And together, they would arrive on time. The journey to the first altar took 6 days. Winter, mountains. The cold was so biting it cut through his lungs. Ethan walked and counted heartbeats, breaths, his own, others, habit. Eowyn limped more in the cold. He saw it. He rebandaged her leg twice a day. She didn't complain, never complained. He didn't ask if it hurt. He just bandaged it. Kang Jiun walked ahead with Ren. 2 professionals, reconnaissance and tactics. They didn't talk. There was no need. Both read the terrain like a book. Rocks, trees, tracks, wind. Kang Jiun pointed. Ren nodded, or vice versa. After 3 days, they moved like a single mechanism. Ethan watched. In the ambulance, he'd worked with various partners. The best pairs were the ones who didn't talk. They just knew. Serafina walked beside him, silently. Her shield magic was constantly active, weakly, barely noticeable, like a constant background process. She was shielding the group from detection. It was taking a heavy toll on her. Ethan saw it. She was paler with each passing day. Dark circles under her eyes. The migraines had returned. He massaged her shoulders every evening, made her eat, made her drink. She obeyed, not because he ordered her to, because she trusted him. And every time his hands touched her shoulders, her magic flared brighter. Resonance, not mysticism, trust transformed into power. Hanasan walked barefoot through the snow. No one was surprised anymore. She could see the road. She warned them. A landslide around that bend. Go to the right. A snowstorm in an hour. Take shelter. Her visions had become more accurate, clearer, like a calibrated instrument. She worked better when she was with Ethan, not because he gave her strength, because he gave her peace. And from that peace, her visions came through clear. Lyra carried a bag of tools on her back, heavy. She refused to hand it over. My tools, my burden, her nature. Ethan smiled as he looked at her. 17 years old, in the mountains in winter, with a bag weighing half a hundredweight, with a smile on her frozen face. She reminded him of first-year interns who haul a bag of equipment up the stairs to the 9th floor because the elevator is broken, and smile, because they don't yet know it will always be this way. On the 5th day, they found the altar. Hanasan led them there. Exactly, like a GPS. A stone platform at the top of the mountain, round, 20 paces in diameter, ancient symbols on the stones, carved deep, thousands of years ago. A depression in the middle, a bowl made of stone. This is where the ley lines converged. Ethan could feel it, a rumbling in his bones, the same as in the forest when he touched the ground and it caught fire. Only 1,000 times stronger. The ground beneath his feet trembled, barely noticeable, like a heartbeat, faint, fading. The world was dying. He felt it with his whole body. Lyra examined the altar, intact, not destroyed. The stones were in place, the symbols were legible. She said, "It works. It must work." Hanasan stood in the center. She closed her eyes. She stood for a minute, 2. Then she opened them. She said, "Everything here remembers. Every stone remembers the 13 women who died here, and the millions of men who died by their will. The earth remembers and waits." But they were not alone. At dawn on the 6th day, lights appeared on the mountain path. Torches, dozens, hundreds. The church. The Supreme Mother Yolanda had sent an army. No, she had come herself. Ethan saw her at dawn, a small figure in a dark red robe among the armored warriors. Old, gray-haired, with a face on which every wrinkle was a decision upon which thousands of lives depended. She stood on the path below the altar and looked up. Kang Ji-yun drew her sword. Ren drew her bowstring. Serafina stepped forward. Her shield flashed silver. Ethan said, "Stop, everyone, wait." He walked down toward Yolanda, alone, unarmed. Ren shouted from behind. Serafina shouted. He didn't stop. He walked down the stone path toward the church's army and toward the woman who had ordered his death. Yolanda looked at him. Old eyes, dark, deep. They held everything. Fear, anger, weariness, and else. Something he'd seen in patients who'd carried a secret so long it had become part of their body. Like a tumor, one that couldn't be cut out without killing the patient. He stopped 5 steps away, raised his hands, open palms, like on the first day with Ren, like always. He said, "I know the truth, about the silence, about the ritual, about the primordial mothers. I know what you know. 6 generations. I know you ordered my death. I know why." Yolanda was silent. He continued, "I didn't come to prove you were wrong. I came to tell you that now you can rest." Silence. Mountain wind, snow, the light of the rising sun on the stones. Yolanda stood there, small, old, bent under the weight of 2,500 years of lies she had carried, just as her mother and her mother's mother had carried them. She opened her mouth, closed it. Then tears began to fall from her eyes, slowly, down her wrinkles, like water on stone. She wept silently, without a sound, like Ren in the forest on the first day, like Hanasun by the fire, like Serafina when she thought no one was watching, like all the women of this world, quietly. She raised her hand. The army behind her froze. She lowered her hand, turned around, spoke one word to her warriors. Stop. Then she walked up the path, past Ethan, to the altar. He followed her. They all stood at the altar. Serafina, Hanasun, Ren, Kang Ji-yun, Lyra, Aowen, Yolanda, and him. 8 people, 7 women and 1 man. The first man at this altar in 2,500 years. Hanasun read the scroll. Ancient words. A ritual opposite to the one performed by the primordial mothers. Not with blood, not with death, with resonance, with connection, with what Ethan had given each of them all these months, with his presence, with his trust, with his name. He stood in the center, on the stone bowl. The earth hummed, louder. The ley lines beneath the stone flared. Golden light. Warm. Familiar. The same as in the forest when he first touched the earth, only brighter, brighter than the sun. He could feel them, all of them, the veins of the world, fading, weak, like the pulse of a dying patient. He knew this moment, knew it all too well. The moment when it is decided. Life or death. And it is not God who decides, not fate. It is decided by the one who stands beside him and does not let go of his hand. 7 women approached. Each placed a hand on his chest, on his shoulders, on his arms. Serafina, her forehead against his, eyes closed, her shield flashed silver and dissolved into golden light. Hanasun, her palm on his heart, her eyes open, clear, clearer than ever. She saw everything, the past, the present, the future, and for the first time, she wasn't afraid. Ren, her hand in his, tightly, so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She wasn't crying, she was smiling. Kang Ji-yun, her hand on his shoulder, heavy, firm, a soldier's hand. She said quietly, "We'll live on." Lyra, both hands on his arm, crying and laughing at the same time. She said through her tears, "I told you so. 200 years too soon." Aowen. She put her arms around his shoulders. She said one word, "Son." Yolanda, the last one. She placed her palm on his forehead, an old hand, cold, trembling. She closed her eyes and let go. Not the hand, a lie. 2,500 years of lies. Light flooded the altar, the mountain, the sky. Not white, not gold. Warm. The color of a lamp on night duty. The color of the light in an ambulance at 3 in the morning when you're holding someone's hand and saying, "Breathe, it'll be okay." The ley lines flared all at once across the entire continent, like a heart that started beating again after stopping. The first beat, the second, the third. The world began to breathe. Ethan stood in the center of the light and felt the ground beneath his feet come alive. As the world's pulse grew steadier, stronger, as his veins filled with a power that had been absent for 2,500 years, he closed his eyes, and for a single second, for a single moment, he saw Portland, the intersection, the steering wheel, the headlights, and Maya, alive, unharmed. With his coffee in her hand and tears on her cheeks, he smiled. She had survived. He had survived. In a different way, but he had survived. The light faded, slowly, like a sunset. He opened his eyes. He was standing on the altar, 7 women around him, all alive, all here. He looked at them, one by one, at each one by name. Serafina, Hanasun, Ren, Kang Ji-yun, Lyra, Aowen, Yolanda. And each of them looked at him, and each saw not a hero, not a savior, not a man from legend, a medic, who had worked a very long, very strange shift, and finally finished it. He said, hoarsely, quiet, "Okay, all right. Will someone bring me some water and a rag? Please." Ren laughed first, then Kang Ji-yun, then Lyra, then everyone. Through tears, through the light, through 2,500 years of silence that had finally ended. A year later, in a small village in the south of the continent, a woman gave birth to a boy. the first in 2,500 years. Ethan found out 3 days later. A messenger rode into the capital. He went himself, on horseback, Wren by his side, as always. He entered the house, small, poor, clean. The woman was lying on the bed, tired, happy. The infant in her arms, small, red, wrinkled, screaming, like all babies in all worlds. Ethan took him in his arms, carefully, as usual. He had held newborns hundreds of times, in Portland, in ambulances, in elevators, on sidewalks. This one was like all the others, and like no one else. He stood in a small house in southern Celestina, holding the boy in his arms. The first boy in 2,500 years. And he cried. Not like a hero, not like a savior, like a paramedic who had finally finished his shift. A long one, a very long shift, the longest of his life. Wren stood in the doorway. She looked at him, at the baby, at his tears, and for the first time in her life she said aloud what she had long carried inside, quietly, just to him. Thank you for coming back. Far away, in another world, in Portland, Oregon, a woman named Maya placed flowers on the grave. She stood there. The wind ruffled her hair. She smiled. She said quietly, I hope you're not too bored up there. She walked away without looking back. He wasn't bored.